The Centauri Odyssey, a book written by Mesrour Karim, read to you by John Keller and Sarah Fuller. Chapter 1. SS Centauri Pioneer.
Kaleb, do you ever get the feeling that we're just tiny specks in the grand scheme of things?
Anika asked, her gaze fixed on the mesmerizing dance of the stars outside the ship's window. Kaleb, lost in thought, glanced at her, and then back at the cosmic panorama beyond the glass. Sometimes, he admitted, but I also like to think that we're part of something much bigger. With that, the conversation lulled, and they both found themselves immersed in the beauty of the cosmos, contemplating their place in it all. This was aboard the SS Centauri Pioneer, a marvel of human achievement, a true masterpiece of engineering, and a symbol of humanity's progress and ingenuity. It sailed through the vast, uncharted territories of space with remarkable grace, its streamlined silhouette cutting through the inky blackness of the cosmos like a celestial sword. This state-of-the-art cargo ship represents the pinnacle of human technological advancement and imagination. Its design a testimony to humanity's unwavering perseverance and resourcefulness, as it pushes the boundaries of what was once thought impossible. The reflective hull of the ship glimmers like a distant star, mirroring the starlight in a mesmerizing interplay of light and shadow. Its surface is a mosaic of reflections that change with every shift in perspective, as if inviting the viewer to explore the mysteries of the universe. The Pioneer's sleek exterior was crafted with unmatched precision, utilizing advanced materials that balance strength and weightlessness, enabling it to withstand the harsh conditions of space while maintaining exceptional maneuverability. Its aerodynamic contours were not only visually striking, but also served to reduce resistance when navigating the occasional pockets of interstellar gas and debris. The ship's cutting-edge propulsion system employed the power of tachyons, achieving unmatched speed and near-silent operation. This inconspicuous and effective propulsion emerged from relentless research, integrating the newest advancements in energy generation and management. Thus, the Pioneer could span the immense distances between stars in just moments. As the SS Centauri Pioneer progressed on its voyage, a stunning celestial landscape unraveled around it, displaying spiraling galaxies, shimmering nebulas, and flickering stars. Amid this cosmic vista, the craft seemed to glide like a phantom, its gleaming hull swaying in harmony with the interstellar radiance. At the heart of this exceptional machine lay a sophisticated artificial intelligence system, an electronic consciousness that breathed life into the vessel, guiding its course through the boundless cosmic expanse with remarkable intuition. This cutting-edge AI represented the pinnacle of years of research and development, its complex algorithms and neural networks engineered to learn, adapt, and evolve in response to each new obstacle. The digital consciousness flawlessly merged with the Pioneer's countless systems, supervising and regulating every facet of the ship's performance to guarantee maximum efficiency and safety. From the life support systems that preserved a breathable environment to the precisely calibrated propulsion systems that drove the craft across light years, the AI was a vigilant guardian, its attentive eye never deviating from its responsibilities. It was capable of processing immense amounts of data within nanoseconds, scrutinizing and responding to the ever-shifting conditions of space with unrivaled accuracy. The AI's presence was felt throughout the ship, its holographic interfaces materializing at key locations to provide crew members with vital information and assistance. These digital apparitions flickered into existence at a moment's notice, their ethereal forms casting a soft glow upon the surrounding environment. As the crew interacted with these holograms, they were struck by the AI's remarkable capacity for understanding and empathy, a testament to the meticulous programming that had given rise to this sentient marvel. Kaleb, however, had always been somewhat bothered by the omnipresent AI on the ship. Although he appreciated its capabilities and efficiency, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was constantly being monitored. As a software engineer, he understood the importance of AI in modern technology, but he also valued his privacy and independence. Hunched over his workstation, Kaleb meticulously examined each line of code for the water production system, his fingers tapping away on the keyboard with rhythmic precision. The soft glow of the screen bathed his face in a cool bluish light, illuminating his furrowed brow and the intensity in his eyes. With each passing moment, he delved deeper into the intricate web of algorithms, searching for ways to enhance the system's efficiency and reliability. As Kaleb's focus narrowed, He barely noticed the sound of footsteps approaching. Annika, a lively and spirited medical officer, happened to be passing by when she caught sight of Kaleb's intense concentration. Dr. Williams, as she was formally known, had a knack for lifting the spirits of her fellow crew members, and she couldn't resist the opportunity to offer Kaleb some much-needed levity.
Hey, Kaleb, you know you've been staring at that screen for hours, right?
Annika called out, leaning casually against the doorframe.
Come on, you need a break. Your brain might melt if you don't give it some rest.
Kaleb looked up, a wry smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. All right, Dr. Williams, you win. I could use a break. Together, they made their way to the mess hall, the hum of the ship's systems and the subtle presence of the AI fading into the background as they walked. Upon entering, they found a few crewmates scattered around, engaged in hushed conversations or quietly enjoying their meals. As Kaleb and Annika settled into their seats, a light-hearted conversation blossomed between them. They began sharing stories about their loved ones, laughter filling the air as they recounted humorous anecdotes and shared inside jokes that brought smiles to their faces. The warmth of their conversation created a comforting atmosphere, offering a much-needed respite from the immense responsibility that weighed heavily upon their shoulders. Kaleb started, You know, Annika, I was really skeptical when Marie first told me she was joining the colony. I mean, I knew it was a prestigious project and all, but it just seemed so out there, you know? Annika nodded in agreement, urging Kaleb to continue. But then, Kaleb said, seeing her passion for the project, the way her eyes would light up when she talked about all the things they were going to accomplish, it just ignited something inside me. I couldn't help but want to be a part of it, to help create a better future for her and for everyone else. Kaleb's eyes sparkled with a mixture of pride and longing as he spoke of his wife. Annika, understanding the depth of Kaleb's feelings, empathized with him.
I know what you mean, Kaleb. My husband, Raj, and our 2 kids are back on Earth. They're so proud of me, but it's hard being away from them, especially during important moments like birthdays and anniversaries.
Kaleb nodded, feeling the weight of their shared sacrifice.
Still,
Annika added with a smile.
Knowing that we're all working towards a better future, one where our children and grandchildren can thrive, makes it worth it. It's not just about us anymore. It's about the generations to come.
As their conversation flowed, other crewmates occasionally stopped by their table to exchange pleasantries or share a quick laugh. Some joined in, adding their own stories and experiences to the conversation. It seemed that, for a brief moment, the heavy burden of their mission had been lifted, replaced by a sense of camaraderie and shared purpose that reminded them all why they had chosen this path. One of their fellow crew members, Julia, shared a particularly touching story about her daughter's recent graduation, which she had attended via holographic projection.
It wasn't the same as being there in person, but it meant the world to her that I could still be a part of it,
she said, wiping a tear from her eye. As Kaleb and Annika's conversation continued effortlessly, they found themselves veering into light-hearted territory. Their laughter filled the mess hall, drawing the attention of other crew members who couldn't help but gravitate toward the source of merriment. It was evident that everyone was eager to participate in the shared amusement, which provided a much-needed break from the intense pressures of their mission. Kaleb started, recounting the time he'd attempted to create a makeshift pizza with a rice cake base, topped with a questionable blend of dehydrated vegetables, and a cheese substitute that tasted more like rubber than dairy. As he described the bizarre culinary concoction, the gathered crew members couldn't help but chuckle, imagining the scene unfolding. Annika's laughter bubbled up as she pictured Kaleb's expression upon taking that first underwhelming bite. Annika, encouraged by Kaleb's amusing story, decided to share one of her own. With a grin, she began recounting her husband's less-than-stellar cooking skills. She described how, in a well-intentioned attempt to recreate her favorite dish, he had somehow managed to birth a new culinary monstrosity. The final result was so far from the intended meal that it was barely recognizable. They smirked at the mental image of Annika's husband standing proudly in their kitchen, presenting his creation as if it were a gourmet masterpiece. Annika continued, explaining that their children, amused by the outcome, had affectionately dubbed the dish
Dad's surprise.
The name had stuck, and the dish became a running joke within their family. Kaleb countered with an anecdote about the time he and Marie had gone hiking, only to find themselves lost and without cell service, leading to an impromptu and unforgettable night under the stars. As the conversation wound down, Annika glanced at her watch, realizing how much time had passed. She called out to another crew member passing by.
Hey, Andrew, don't think I've forgotten about your checkup. You're overdue. Make sure to swing by the med bay later, all right?
Andrew nodded, acknowledging Annika's reminder, and continued on his way. Kaleb smiled at the scene, his thoughts drifting back to the day he first met Andrew during the selection process for the Proxima Centauri program. The memories played like a movie in his mind, the vivid details coming to life once more. At the Musk Space Center, the atmosphere in the room had been thick with anticipation as candidates from all over the world gathered, each vying for a place on the mission that could change the course of human history. This memory played vividly in Kaleb's mind, taking him back to that moment of intense competition. The selection process had been grueling, with rigorous tests designed to push each candidate to their limits, both mentally and physically. Kaleb remembered the camaraderie that quickly formed among the candidates, despite the fierce competition. Among them, he found a kindred spirit in Andrew. They bonded over their shared passion for Martian-themed shows and their love for New York's hot dogs. Although they both hailed from New Jersey, they had to admit that New York's hot dogs are the best. Throughout the selection, Kaleb had been confident in his skills as a software engineer, but he couldn't help wondering if his connection to Marie, who was already on Proxima Centauri B, had tipped the scales in his favor. Nevertheless, he had poured himself into the process, determined to prove that he was not only the right choice for the programming team, but also a valuable asset to the mission as a whole. The selection process had been a roller coaster of emotions, filled with sleepless nights and adrenaline-fueled days. Despite the challenges, Kaleb had persevered, his determination and unwavering commitment to the mission propelling him forward. In the end, he had secured his place on the team. Snapping back to the present, Kaleb waved to Andrew as he walked out of the mess hall. It was time to return to his workstation and continue refining the code he was working on. As Kaleb walked back to his desk, he couldn't help but marvel at the SS Centauri Pioneer's magnificent design. The sleek, streamlined corridors seemed to stretch on forever, punctuated by access hatches and control panels that glittered under the soft, ambient lighting. The ship was a symphony of cutting-edge technology, each component meticulously crafted to perform its specific function in perfect harmony with the others. As Kaleb moved past, his fingers stretched out, delicately caressing the icy metallic surface of the wall. Even after 6 months on board, he still found himself in awe of the engineering marvel that surrounded him. He felt a profound sense of reverence for the team of engineers and scientists who had devoted their lives to crafting this magnificent vessel. Suddenly, as he continued to run his fingers along the wall, the AI's voice chimed in, asking,
"Can I help you with anything, Kaleb?"
Momentarily startled and feeling a hint of irritation at the interruption, Kaleb replied curtly, "No, I was just admiring the ship's design. It's incredible what we've accomplished." The AI responded warmly, seemingly oblivious to Kaleb's annoyance.
"Indeed, the SS Centauri Pioneer represents the pinnacle of human innovation. If you need any assistance, please don't hesitate to ask."
Kaleb nodded and forced a smile, his thoughts briefly disrupted by the AI's interjection. Nonetheless, he continued on his way, still amazed by the breathtaking creation that carried them through the stars. Returning to his workstation, Kaleb focused on his work, his attention completely absorbed by the task at hand. Through the window, the vast emptiness of space stretched out before him, an endless sea of darkness that held the universe's secrets. The Centauri Pioneer moved gracefully through the void, a lone vessel on a mission of hope and discovery. As Kaleb looked out into the blackness, he felt a mixture of humility and awe. The universe was massive and full of wonder, and he was just a tiny part of it. But at the same time, he felt proud, knowing that he and his team were among the few courageous individuals who ventured into the unknown depths of space. They were the trailblazers of the future, expanding the limits of human understanding and imagination with every passing moment. Chapter 2. Headquarter. Nestled within an expansive, fortified complex on Earth, the Space Control Center teemed with life and purpose. This cutting-edge facility housed the finest intellects from space agencies worldwide, all collaborating under the banner of a single, audacious mission, Project Proxima. Although Earth had not yet reached the precipice of devastation, the undeniable signs of its decline were apparent. Depletion of natural resources and environmental degradation caused by humanity's ceaseless expansion had led to a sense of urgency among global leaders. In response, they had committed to the transformation of the human race into an interstellar society, capable of flourishing beyond the limitations of its origin. The initial steps toward this grand aspiration had involved the establishment of colonies on the Moon and Mars. An assembly of devoted scientists and engineers had labored relentlessly to innovate the vital technologies and infrastructure required to sustain life in these unwelcoming landscapes. The accomplishments of these colonies had fanned the flames of their resolve, propelling humanity to reach even deeper into the vast expanse of the cosmos. The Space Control Center buzzed with an air of anticipation and excitement as each individual played their part in this monumental endeavor. The facility was a hive of ingenuity and creativity, where breakthroughs were celebrated and setbacks were seen as opportunities to refine and improve. The walls, adorned with blueprints and mission plans, bore witness to the unyielding spirit of exploration and the determination to conquer the unknown. But it was the advent of the tachyonic propulsion system that truly revolutionized space travel, allowing humanity to consider venturing beyond the familiar boundaries of its solar system. With this groundbreaking technology, the once insurmountable distances that separated the stars seemed suddenly within reach. Inside the Space Control Center, engineers, scientists, and mission specialists huddled around glowing computer screens, analyzing complex streams of data and coordinating the countless logistical details required to bring Project Proxima to fruition. The atmosphere was electric, charged with anticipation and purpose. In one corner of the control center, a group of propulsion experts engaged in a heated debate over the fine-tuning of the tachyonic engine, eager to optimize its performance and reduce travel times even further. Elsewhere, a team of astrophysicists pored over the latest data on the Alpha Centauri system, diligently searching for potential hazards that could impact the mission. The tachyonic propulsion system had revolutionized humanity's understanding of what was possible. With this type of engine, traveling to the Alpha Centauri system, located a staggering 4.3 light-years away, was no longer a journey that would take generations. Instead, it could now be accomplished in just 18 months. The potential for exploration and colonization had been magnified exponentially, opening up a realm of possibilities that had once been the stuff of science fiction. The walls of the Space Control Center were adorned with awe-inspiring images of distant celestial bodies, serving as a constant reminder of the ultimate goal, the establishment of a human presence among the stars. High-resolution displays showcased real-time video feeds from the lunar and Martian colonies, as well as from the various spacecraft that were preparing to embark on their own interstellar journeys. Within the bustling Space Control Center, a young analyst named Sebastian sat at his workstation, intently monitoring the incoming communications from the distant SS Centauri Pioneer. He fidgeted with a pen, twirling it between his fingers as he kept his eyes locked on the screen, awaiting the next transmission. Sebastian was a recent graduate, fresh out of the prestigious International Space Academy, and this was his first assignment at the Space Control Center. His excitement was tempered by the weight of responsibility he felt, knowing that even the smallest oversight could have far-reaching consequences for the mission. As the communication from the ship's artificial intelligence finally arrived, Sebastian eagerly read through the message. It was a routine status update, providing details on the ship's systems, crew activities, and navigational progress. Everything appeared to be running smoothly, and the AI reported no major issues. However, as Sebastian reached the end of the report, he noticed a brief mention of some minor irregularities with the ship's vibrations. According to the AI, the deviations were a mere 0.02% from the norm, a seemingly insignificant amount. Still, Sebastian's training had taught him the importance of vigilance, and he knew better than to dismiss the AI's observation without further investigation. He rose from his seat, the pen still in his hand, and made his way through the busy control center to his supervisor's office. As he walked, he mentally reviewed the ship's specifications, trying to determine what might cause such an anomaly in the vibrations. He considered various scenarios, from a misaligned engine component to the unlikely possibility of space debris impacting the hull. Reaching the office, Sebastian knocked on the open door and entered, finding his supervisor, Dr. Patel, absorbed in a report on her own screen. Dr. Patel was a seasoned engineer with decades of experience in spacecraft design and maintenance. Her expertise was invaluable to the Space Control Center, and Sebastian knew he could trust her judgment. "Excuse me, Dr. Patel," Sebastian began, hesitating slightly. "I've just received the latest update from the Pioneer's AI, and while everything appears to be running smoothly, there was a brief mention of some slight irregularities in the ship's vibrations. It's only a 0.02% deviation from the norm, but I thought it best to bring it to your attention." Dr. Patel looked up from her screen, her expression a mix of curiosity and concern. She appreciated Sebastian's diligence, understanding the importance of addressing even the smallest issues in a mission of this magnitude.
Thank you, Sebastian. It's probably nothing to worry about, but you're right. It's always better to be safe than sorry. Let's take a closer look at the data and see if we can determine the cause of these irregularities.
The following day, a meeting was organized in the prestigious conference room Arthurus, where the lead scientists and experts from the Project Proxima team gathered to discuss the ship's vibration irregularities. Sebastian, the young analyst who had discovered the anomaly, was also invited to attend, as his insight might be valuable to the discussion. The conference room was spacious and sophisticated, its high ceilings and walls adorned with inspiring images of space exploration and technological breakthroughs. A large oval table occupied the center of the room, surrounded by comfortable ergonomic chairs. Projector screens were mounted on the walls, ready to display any relevant data or visual aids. Dr. Nelson, the project's lead scientist and a renowned expert in the field of interstellar travel, called the meeting to order. His voice was steady and confident as he addressed his colleagues. "I've called this meeting to discuss the 0.02% vibration irregularity that Sebastian identified yesterday. We need to understand and address this issue, even if it appears minor on the surface." The room buzzed with murmurs of concern and interest as the team of experts listened intently. They knew that their collective knowledge and experience would be crucial in determining the severity of the situation and deciding on the appropriate course of action. As the meeting progressed, an in-depth exchange took place between the experts, each contributing their own perspectives and ideas on the matter. Dr. Chen, a seasoned engineer, interjected. "What could be the potential causes of this irregularity? We must consider all possibilities." Another expert responded, "Yes, and we need to assess the risks it might pose to the mission and determine the steps that can be taken to address the issue." Sebastian, though relatively inexperienced compared to the seasoned experts in the room, was given the opportunity to share his findings and thoughts on the matter. "I've worked closely with Dr. Patel on a risk evaluation," he began, "and we've considered various factors and performed a thorough analysis." As he presented the results of their evaluation, his colleagues listened attentively, asking questions and offering suggestions. The dialogue continued, each expert bringing their unique perspective to the table, as they sought to understand the irregularity and ensure the safety of the SS Centauri Pioneer's crew. The discussion was lively and engaging, with the experts considering every angle and weighing the evidence before them. They explored various scenarios, from the possibility of a flaw in the ship's construction to the impact of space debris, or even unforeseen forces at play in the interstellar environment. After hours of careful deliberation, the team of experts finally reached a consensus. They agreed that, based on the available data and the risk evaluation conducted by Sebastian and Dr. Patel, the 0.02% variation in the ship's vibrations was within acceptable limits and posed no significant threat to the mission. However, they also emphasized the importance of continued monitoring and vigilance, acknowledging that the situation could change as the ship ventured further into uncharted territory. It was crucial to maintain open lines of communication with the crew and ensure that any potential issues were identified and addressed as quickly as possible. Dr. Nelson tasked Sebastian with the responsibility of conveying their findings to the SS Centauri Pioneer's crew. He instructed the young analyst to send a detailed report, outlining the risk evaluation they had conducted and the conclusion they had reached. The goal was to reassure the crew that the experts on Earth had carefully assessed the situation and were confident that the ship's vibrations were within acceptable parameters. Sebastian made his way back to his workstation, eager to share the reassuring news with the crew of the Centauri Pioneer. He settled into his ergonomic chair and began to draft the message. As Sebastian's fingers seemed to take on a life of their own, Dancing across the keyboard with grace and speed, he couldn't help but feel a sense of responsibility for the crew's well-being. He thought to himself, it's important to reassure them, but also to be transparent about the situation. He meticulously outlined the risk evaluation process, detailing the various factors and considerations that had informed their conclusions. He was careful to use clear, concise language, ensuring that the complex scientific concepts were easily understood by the ship's diverse crew. As his report took shape, Sebastian contemplated how to instill confidence without dismissing their concerns. It's crucial to strike the right balance between reassurance and honesty, he thought. With that in mind, he made a conscious effort to infuse the message with a sense of reassurance and confidence, knowing that the crew needed to feel secure in the knowledge that the experts on Earth were diligently monitoring their progress and supporting their efforts. He emphasized the conclusion that the 0.02% vibration irregularity was within acceptable limits, and that they had no reason to believe it posed any significant risk to the mission. As Sebastian prepared to send the message, he marveled at the technology that would make instant communication with the Pioneer possible. The ship was the first of its kind to be equipped with a groundbreaking system utilizing quantum entanglement, allowing for instantaneous transmission of information across vast interstellar distances. As he reflected on this marvel, he recalled the initial skepticism of many experts when the concept was first introduced. However, years of research and development had eventually led to the creation of a stable and reliable communication system that defied the limitations of traditional methods, rendering signal delays and transmission time obsolete. The pioneers of this technology had unlocked the secrets of quantum intricacy, connecting particles in such a way that the state of one particle could instantaneously affect the state of another, regardless of the distance between them. This innovation had proven to be a game-changer for space exploration and communication, fostering a level of connection between Earth and the far reaches of the cosmos previously thought unimaginable. Having just sent the message, Sebastian's gaze shifted from his monitor to the large screen on the wall, which displayed the Pioneer's trajectory. He could see the bright line cutting through the vast darkness of space, representing the ship's path. As the message made its way to the crew, his fingers began to fidget with his pen, the familiar motion a sign of his wandering thoughts. The room had grown quiet, a stark contrast to the earlier hustle and bustle of activity. Most of the staff had already left the complex, leaving Sebastian as one of the last few still present. The soft hum of machinery and faint clicks of his pen were the only sounds accompanying his thoughts. He leaned back in his chair, taking a moment to appreciate the silence. The weight of the day's work seemed to dissipate with each passing second. A yawn escaped him, a sign that his energy was waning. Sebastian glanced at his watch, noting the late hour. The soft glow of the screen illuminated the dimly lit room, casting a pale light on his face. He sighed, realizing that it was time to call it a day and head home. The Pioneer would continue its journey through the cosmos, and he knew that tomorrow would bring a new set of challenges to overcome. With a final glance at the screen, he pushed back his chair and prepared to leave, the anticipation of home and rest tugging at him like a gentle breeze. Chapter 3. Life in the Void of Space. Kaleb floated through the narrow hallway of the SS Centauri Pioneer, his fingertips gently brushing against the cool metal walls for guidance. The dim lighting and constant hum of machinery created an almost soothing atmosphere. Well, as soothing as one could expect on an interstellar journey with the fate of an entire colony resting on their shoulders. He pushed himself into the common area, where a few of his fellow crew members were gathered. They were an eclectic bunch, each bringing their unique skills and backgrounds to the mission. There was Dr. Annika Williams, the ship's doctor and resident yoga enthusiast. She insisted that maintaining their flexibility was essential for surviving long periods in zero gravity. Kaleb had yet to be convinced. Then there was Captain Ramirez, the seasoned space veteran with a weathered face that hinted at countless stories of adventures and close calls. He had a penchant for black coffee and dad jokes, an odd combination that somehow seemed to fit him perfectly. Kaleb had grown fond of the captain's dry sense of humor and calm demeanor. At the other end of the table, two engineers, Andrew and Lila, were engaged in a heated debate about the best way to optimize the ship's energy consumption. Their conversations often devolved into impassioned discussions about obscure engineering concepts, leaving the rest of the crew both bemused and mildly concerned. As Kaleb took his seat, he noticed the ship's botanist, Michael, hunched over a small container filled with plants. The green leaves seemed to be the only splash of color in the otherwise monochrome environment. Michael was responsible for maintaining the hydroponic garden that provided fresh produce for the crew, but he also had a peculiar attachment to his leafy companions, treating them as if they were his own children. They had all come together for a singular purpose, delivering a crucial water production system to the struggling colony on Proxima Centauri b. With the colony's existing water infrastructure on the brink of collapse, their mission was nothing short of a lifeline. Kaleb knew the stakes were high, but he couldn't help but appreciate the camaraderie and a shared sense of purpose that had developed among the crew. He had been so focused on his thoughts that he almost missed Captain Ramirez's voice cutting through the low hum of the ship. "All right, team," the captain said, his voice steady and authoritative. "Let's go over our mission objectives one more time. We can't afford any mistakes. Our friends on Proxima Centauri b are counting on us." As the crew members caught each other's gaze, a sense of unspoken determination passed between them. Kaleb couldn't suppress a smile as he took in their diverse backgrounds, each person bringing their unique skills and experiences to the team. Together, they formed a close-knit unit, united by a common goal in the vast, uncharted frontier of space. They were the SS Centauri Pioneer, and they were poised to rescue the colony. Kaleb couldn't help but smirk as Captain Ramirez cleared his throat and began his pep talk. "So, as we all know, our mission is to deliver the new water production system to Proxima Centauri b," he began, tapping a few buttons on his wrist-mounted tablet. "But I think it's important we also remember to have a little fun along the way." Dr. Williams raised an eyebrow. "Captain, are you suggesting we have a space party?" Captain Ramirez chuckled. "Not exactly, Dr. Williams. I was thinking more along the lines of a friendly wager." The crew exchanged curious glances as the captain continued. "We've been on this ship together for quite some time now, and I think it's safe to say we've all become a bit more quirky than when we first set off." Michael, still tending to his plants, let out a small laugh. "I don't know what you're talking about, Captain. I've always been this charming." Ramirez grinned. "Well, I propose a little competition. Each of us will come up with a unique, space-themed talent that we can perform. At the end of our journey, we'll put on a little show for each other. The winner gets first dibs on the fresh batch of strawberries that Michael's been growing." Kaleb couldn't help but chuckle as he imagined his fellow crew members performing outlandish acts in zero gravity. Lila, the usually serious engineer, piped up,
I could do a stand-up comedy routine. I've been working on some killer material about the relativity of time and space.
Captain Ramirez nodded approvingly. "Sounds great, Lila. How about you, Andrew?" Andrew looked thoughtful for a moment. "I've always wanted to try juggling in zero gravity. I'll need to practice, but I think I can pull it off." Kaleb's mind raced as he tried to come up with his own space-themed talent. Software engineering didn't exactly lend itself to entertaining performances. But then, an idea struck him. "I've got it," he announced. "I'll create a holographic light show using the ship's projection system. It'll be like a miniature aurora borealis, right here on the Centauri Pioneer." The crew members clapped and cheered as they all began discussing their acts and making plans for their impromptu space talent show. The stakes of their mission were high, but moments like these reminded him that they were all in it together, a team united by their shared purpose and the desire to make the most of their time in the vast expanse of space. The next day, the crew of the SS Centauri Pioneer gathered in the control room, their lighthearted mood from the previous day replaced by an air of focused determination. Captain Ramirez stood at the front of the room, his face serious as he addressed his crew. "All right, team. Today we're going to run a full systems check as a drill in case of an emergency," he announced. "We need to be prepared for anything, and that means knowing our ship inside and out." Kaleb nodded in agreement. With their crucial mission, it was essential that they could handle any unexpected situations that might arise during their long journey. Captain Ramirez continued, "We'll break into teams to cover all the major systems. John and Lila, you'll take the propulsion and navigation systems. Dr. Williams, I'd like you to work with Michael on life support and the hydroponic garden. And Kaleb, you'll be with me checking the communication systems and ensuring the water production system software is functioning properly." The crew members nodded, and set off to their respective tasks. Kaleb and Captain Ramirez floated through the ship's corridors, making their way to the communications hub. The captain was silent as they worked, his brow furrowed in concentration. Kaleb couldn't help but feel a bit nervous, knowing that their mission's success hinged on the proper functioning of the systems they were checking. As they went through their checklist, testing each component and running diagnostics, Kaleb noticed the captain occasionally glancing his way. Finally, the captain spoke up. "Kaleb, I know we've been having a bit of fun lately, but I wanted to make sure the crew understand the importance of our mission. That water production system is the key to the survival of the colony on Proxima." Kaleb nodded solemnly. "I understand, Captain. I've been working closely with the team that developed the software for the water production system, and I'm confident it'll perform as expected. But you're right, we need to be prepared for anything." Captain Ramirez gave him a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "That's the spirit, Kaleb. We've got the best crew I could ask for, and I have no doubt that we'll complete this mission successfully." As Kaleb observed the crew diligently working on their systems check, a swell of pride welled up within him. The team members moved with purpose, each one focused on their respective tasks, ensuring that every aspect of the ship's systems was in perfect working order. Their dedication and commitment to the mission were palpable, filling the air with an undeniable energy. Kaleb made his way to the life support area to verify the environmental controls. He floated past the hydroponic garden and spotted Michael, meticulously pruning the plants with a pair of shears. "Hey, Michael," Kaleb called out. "How's the garden holding up?" Michael looked up from his work, a broad smile on his face. "Better than ever, Kaleb. The strawberries are coming along nicely, and I think I've finally found the secret to growing the perfect tomato in zero gravity." Kaleb chuckled, admiring the vibrant green foliage that filled the room. "That's great. I'm here to check the life support systems. Mind if I join you?" "Of course not, buddy. I could use the company," Michael replied, gesturing for Kaleb to float over. As Kaleb began inspecting the various control panels and gauges, he and Michael struck up a conversation about their families back on Earth. Kaleb found himself opening up about his wife, Marie, and how much he missed her. "You know, I can't help but feel a little guilty sometimes," Kaleb confessed. "I mean, here I am, floating around in space, while Marie's down there working her tail off to help establish the colony." Michael offered a sympathetic nod. "I get it, man, but just remember, we're doing our part too. Without that water production system, the colony wouldn't stand a chance." Kaleb let out a sigh. "Yeah, you're right. It's just tough being so distant, you know?" Michael put a reassuring hand on Kaleb's shoulder. "I understand. But hey, we're all in this together, aren't we? We'll make it through." Kaleb gave a playful smirk and quipped, "Thanks, man. But just because I'm away from my wife doesn't mean you should try to make a move on me." "You cheeky rascal," Michael retorted as he withdrew his hand from Kaleb's shoulder. Their laughter filled the air, lightening the mood for a moment. As Kaleb and his fellow crew members continued their systems check, their interactions seamlessly flowed from one to another. They exchanged knowing glances and supportive nods, silently acknowledging the burdens and responsibilities each of them carried. With each completed task, their movements synchronized, displaying the unity forged by their shared mission. Day by day, the team's bond visibly strengthened, preparing them to confront the challenges that awaited them. As Kaleb wrapped up his life support system checks, he felt a sudden and urgent pressure in his lower abdomen. He grimaced, realizing he had been so focused on the drills that he had neglected his own bodily needs. "Man, why now?" Kaleb muttered under his breath as he clutched his stomach. He quickly excused himself from Michael and began floating hurriedly towards the living quarters. As Kaleb navigated the narrow corridors, he couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of his predicament. You'd think they'd have invented a more convenient way to handle bathroom breaks in space by now, he thought, trying to distract himself from the increasing urgency. As Kaleb rounded the bend into the living quarters, his gaze was instantly drawn to the compact restroom door situated at the farthest reaches of the space. Just a little further, he mentally urged himself, imploring his body to persevere for a few moments more. Approaching the door, his trembling hands grappled with the latch, quivering from a blend of nerves and desperation. At last the door yielded and swung open, allowing Kaleb to drift inside with a palpable sense of relief, exclaiming triumphantly, "Aha!" Settling into position, Kaleb found himself reflecting on the peculiarity of utilizing a restroom in a weightless environment. The walls, lined with straps and handles, provided essential support for tasks that were once taken for granted on Earth. The intricacies of zero-gravity plumbing and waste disposal systems stood in stark contrast to their terrestrial counterparts, demanding a level of finesse and concentration that Kaleb had never anticipated. You know, they never mention this part in those glamorous astronaut recruitment videos, he mused, a wry grin forming on his face as he chuckled at the thought. Chapter 4. Collision Course. As Kaleb chuckled to himself in the restroom, an ominous series of beeps began emanating from the ship's control panels just outside. The sudden cacophony of alarms pierced through the relative quiet, causing Kaleb's heart to race. Something was seriously wrong. "Artemis, what's going on?" Kaleb called out, trying to keep the panic out of his voice. The ship's AI quickly responded, her tone calm but urgent.
Kaleb, the ship's deflector is misaligned. We're on a collision course with a field of space debris. I recommend that all crew members secure themselves immediately.
Kaleb's eyes widened as the gravity of the situation sunk in. He hastily secured himself to the nearest handrail, hoping the living quarters would offer enough protection from the incoming debris. Moments later, a deafening crash echoed through the ship, followed by a series of smaller impacts. The entire vessel shuddered violently, its metallic walls groaning under the strain. Kaleb gritted his teeth and clung tightly to the handrail, his knuckles turning white. As the ship quivered and convulsed under the relentless assault, Kaleb's thoughts instinctively turned to his fellow crew members. He was acutely aware that Michael had been tending to the hydroponic garden, while the others were dispersed across various sections of the ship. He fervently hoped for their safety, even as the chilling grip of dread tightened around his heart, whispering grim possibilities into his mind. The collisions appeared to stretch on forever, a relentless barrage of chaos and devastation. Yet, at last, the tumultuous cacophony of destruction began to fade, giving way to an unsettling stillness. Kaleb hesitantly unclenched his white-knuckled grip on the handrail, each of his breaths emerging as short, shallow gasps that barely seemed to fill his lungs. His chest tightened with anxiety, and his eyes darted around the dimly lit interior, searching for any indication of life amidst the wreckage. He strained his ears, desperately listening for the comforting sounds of his crewmates' voices, or the familiar hum of footsteps echoing through the ship's corridors. Instead, he was met with the haunting silence that pervaded the damaged vessel, its oppressive weight pressing down on him, magnifying his sense of isolation. Kaleb's heart raced in his chest, as if attempting to fill the void left by the absence of familiar sounds. The eerie quiet seemed to mock him, amplifying the dreadful possibilities that swirled in his mind, each one more harrowing than the last. He felt stunned, as if the very air had been knocked out of his lungs, leaving him reeling in the aftermath of the catastrophe. Kaleb, still trembling from the violent encounter with the space debris, tentatively floated out of the restroom, his eyes scanning the living quarters. The area was a mess, with personal belongings and equipment scattered about, but it seemed to have withstood the impact. He noticed that the air pressure, miraculously, was still intact in this section. "Artemis," Kaleb said, his voice cracking with a mix of fear and desperation. "What's the status of the rest of the ship?"
I'm sorry, Kaleb,
Artemis replied, her voice unnervingly calm.
but most of the other sections have suffered catastrophic damage, and the air pressure has dropped significantly. It appears the living quarters were the only area that maintained air pressure.
Kaleb's heart sank as the grim reality of the situation dawned on him. He knew that the chances of his crewmates surviving the disaster were slim, but he couldn't afford to give up hope just yet. He needed to find out for certain. With a sense of urgency, Kaleb located an emergency spacesuit, clumsily pulling it on as he prepared to venture out into the devastated ship. The suit felt cumbersome and restrictive, but he knew it was his only hope of surviving the treacherous journey ahead. Mustering all the courage he could, Kaleb pulled himself through the debris-strewn living quarters and towards the hatch that led to the rest of the ship. The once brightly lit corridor beyond now seemed like a dark and foreboding chasm, the emergency lighting casting eerie shadows on the damaged walls. "Artemis, how can I safely get through the ship?" he asked, anxiety creeping into his voice.
I'll guide you, Kaleb,
the AI assured him.
I can detect the sections with the most stable air pressure and help you navigate around the most dangerous areas.
With a deep breath, Kaleb began his perilous journey through the crippled SS Centauri Pioneer, clad in his spacesuit, clinging to the hope that he might find any signs of life among the wreckage. Each step forward filled him with dread, as he knew that what awaited him could be the gruesome confirmation of his worst fears. Guided by Artemis, Kaleb moved cautiously through the dark, debris-filled corridors of the Pioneer, his heart pounding in his chest. The normally bustling ship now felt like a tomb, the silence punctuated only by the hum of the emergency lights and the sound of his own labored breathing. As he floated past the crew's quarters, Kaleb hesitated, his hand resting on the handle of one of the doors. He knew that within these rooms lay his friends, colleagues, people he'd come to know as family over the past few months. The thought of finding them lifeless was almost too much to bear, but he knew he had to push forward. With trembling hands, Kaleb opened the door, steeling himself for the sight that awaited him. The room was a mess, personal items strewn about, the air heavy with the scent of loss. He glanced at the desk, where his friend Dr. Annika Williams, the ship's doctor, lay motionless. The sight was both surreal and heartbreaking. Tears welled up in Kaleb's eyes as he moved through the ship, each room bringing more heartache and sorrow. The gravity of the situation weighed heavily upon him, and a crushing sense of hopelessness began to take hold. How could he possibly complete the mission on his own? Was there any point in continuing? "Artemis," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "I can't find any survivors. They're all gone."
I'm sorry, Kaleb.
Artemis replied, her voice gentle and empathetic.
It seems the impact was too severe for anyone else to survive.
Kaleb paused, attempting to collect his thoughts and steady his trembling body. His hand instinctively grasped the jagged edge of a broken console for support, the cold metal biting into his skin. Overcome with a crushing sense of despair, the notion that he was entirely alone and facing seemingly insurmountable challenges gnawed at his spirit. The water production system, vital to the colony's survival, hung in the balance, and the immense responsibility weighed down on him like an unrelenting force. The ship's shadows, lurking in every corner, seemed to close in around Kaleb, as if mocking his helplessness. The dim glow of the few functioning consoles cast eerie shapes onto the walls, heightening the sense of isolation and desolation that enveloped him. The air, once a comforting blanket of warmth, now felt oppressively stifling, choking the hope from his lungs with each labored breath. In the all-consuming darkness, Kaleb's hope waned, its once vibrant flame reduced to a feeble flicker, struggling to maintain its presence amidst the overwhelming despair. His thoughts, once sharp and focused, became tangled in a disarray of fear and doubt, clouding his ability to reason and plan a course of action. The enormity of his predicament threatened to consume him entirely, leaving him adrift in a vast ocean of desolation and loneliness. The once familiar surroundings of the ship now seemed foreign and hostile, each damaged corridor and shattered panel a stark reminder of the catastrophe that had befallen his crew and their mission. The silence, broken only by the distant hum of machinery and his own ragged breaths, served to amplify the void left by the absence of his crewmates. Their laughter, their camaraderie, their shared dreams and aspirations, all reduced to haunting echoes that resonated through the emptiness of the ship. As Kaleb's hope teetered on the brink of extinction, it seemed as if the crushing darkness would claim him, swallowing him whole and leaving him to drift helplessly through the unforgiving void of space. The situation appeared utterly hopeless, and Kaleb couldn't discern a path forward through the impenetrable veil of despair. Chapter 5. The Breach. Kaleb floated through the dimly lit ship, his heart heavy with loss and his mind racing. The situation was dire, and he couldn't help but feel a surge of anger at the universe for dealing him such a cruel hand. The thought of being stranded in space, light years from his wife and any hope of rescue, fueled his frustration. As Kaleb walked by a cracked viewport, he caught sight of the vast, dark emptiness that enveloped him. The sheer magnitude of his predicament started to settle in. He understood that he needed to take control of the situation if he was to survive and accomplish the mission. "Artemis," Kaleb said, his voice strained with anger. "Can you give me a rundown of the ship's current status?" Artemis responded, her voice neutral.
Of course, Kaleb. The ship has suffered extensive damage from the collision. Life support is functional but limited, and the propulsion system is offline. The cargo bay containing the water production system appears to be intact, but it's currently inaccessible due to a breach in the adjacent section.
Kaleb clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms as the reality of the situation became painfully clear. He was stuck on a crippled ship, floating helplessly through space, with only a limited supply of oxygen and dwindling resources. His crewmates were gone, and he was alone. His anger, frustration, and despair threatened to overwhelm him, but he forced himself to take a deep breath and focus on the task at hand. He couldn't afford to let his emotions cloud his judgment. If he was to survive and save the colony on Proxima Centauri b, he needed a plan. "All right, Artemis," Kaleb said, his voice firm and resolute. "Let's start with life support. How long do I have to seal the main breach?"
Based on the current rate of air loss and the ship's ability to compensate, you have approximately 45 minutes to seal the main breach before the situation becomes critical,
Artemis informed him.
The smaller breaches have been automatically sealed by the ship's systems, thanks to the work of Lila, our ship engineer.
Kaleb's jaw tightened at the news. 45 minutes to figure out a way to seal the breach, restore the ship's integrity, and find a way to navigate to Proxima Centauri b to deliver the water production system. The challenge seemed insurmountable, but he refused to let despair take over. The lives of Marie and the others on Centauri b depended on him, and he wouldn't give up without a fight. Kaleb's mind raced as he considered his options. He knew that every second counted, and he needed to act fast. But first, he needed a plan. A plan to not only save himself, but also to ensure that the mission was completed, and the much-needed water production system reached the colony on Proxima Centauri b. He floated back to the living quarters, gathering tools and materials that he might need to seal the main breach. As he did so, he mentally reviewed the ship's layout and the systems that he'd need to repair. "Artemis," Kaleb called out as he secured a roll of duct tape to his belt. "I need you to walk me through the process of sealing the main breach, and once that's done, we need to figure out how to get this ship back on course and operational."
Understood, Kaleb.
Artemis replied, her voice steady and reassuring.
To seal the main breach, you'll need to access the emergency sealant foam stored in the maintenance bay. You'll have to manually apply it to the damaged area, both inside and outside the ship. The foam will expand and harden to create an airtight seal.
Kaleb nodded, trying to visualize the process in his mind. It wouldn't be easy, especially considering the time constraint and the fact that he'd be working in the cold vacuum of space. But he knew that it was his best shot at survival. Kaleb floated towards the maintenance bay, his heart pounding in his chest. It was time to face the challenge head-on, to show the universe that he wouldn't go down without a fight. And as he embarked on this desperate mission, he knew that the memory of his fallen crewmates and the love for his wife, waiting for him on Proxima Centauri b, would give him the strength he needed to succeed. Kaleb reached the maintenance bay, and after a moment of searching, found the emergency sealant foam. He carefully attached the canister to his belt and made his way to the airlock. Before entering, he took a deep breath and tried to mentally prepare himself for the harsh environment that awaited him on the other side. "Artemis, I'm ready. Keep an eye on my life support systems and make sure everything's functioning properly," Kaleb instructed as he started the airlock cycle.
I'll monitor your vital signs closely, Kaleb. Good luck,
Artemis replied. As the airlock door opened, Kaleb was instantly met by the cold, merciless vacuum of space. He couldn't help but think that the cold wouldn't have been an issue if he had access to a proper spacesuit. Unfortunately, their suits had been damaged during the collision, leaving him with a lighter, more basic version meant for interior use, like inside a rover. He pushed off from the airlock, his breath fogging the visor of his makeshift suit. He knew he had to work quickly, gripping the sealant foam tightly in his hands. His heart raced as he floated towards the main breach, every second counting against the ship's life support systems. The scale of the damage came into view as he approached the gaping hole. Kaleb wasted no time in applying the sealant foam to the damaged area, working as quickly and efficiently as possible. The foam expanded rapidly, filling the gaps and creating a temporary but secure seal. Once the interior of the breach was sealed, Kaleb carefully maneuvered himself around to the exterior of the ship and repeated the process. As Kaleb went about his task, a peculiar blend of emotions washed over him. The sensation of being suspended in the void, the emptiness of space engulfing him, stirred a primal fear deep within. Yet in the midst of this terror, he also felt an exhilarating rush, the thrill of facing a challenge that tested the limits of his abilities. His hands worked meticulously, applying the sealant foam with precision as beads of sweat gathered on his brow. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, each beat a reminder of the precious minutes ticking away. The eerie silence of space was both calming and unnerving, amplifying the weight of his own breaths as they echoed in his helmet. He glanced around, taking in the surreal vista of stars and distant planets, feeling simultaneously insignificant and awestruck by the vastness surrounding him. Finally, the breach was sealed, and Kaleb allowed himself a fleeting moment of relief. He knew that the real battle was far from over, but he had bought himself some time. Kicking off from the hull, he navigated back towards the airlock, his body tense with the lingering adrenaline that coursed through his veins. The door loomed before him, a beacon of hope and a reminder that for now he had defied the odds and conquered the void. As he exhaled, he tried to release some of the tension that had built up in his muscles. Kaleb could feel the fatigue setting in, but he knew he couldn't afford to rest just yet. There was still so much work to be done if he was going to have any chance of survival. He focused on his breathing, taking in the stale, recycled air that was now a precious commodity. With each step through the now eerily quiet ship, the weight of the situation pressed down on him. The once lively, close-knit crew was gone, and Kaleb felt the isolation keenly. Artemis guided Kaleb through the ship, displaying a detailed schematic on a nearby screen. The AI highlighted the most critical damage points, as well as the functional systems that were still operational. The picture wasn't promising. The collision had crippled the ship's propulsion and communication systems, making it impossible to continue the mission or even call for help. Kaleb wandered through the corridors, surveying the damage and taking note of the resources that remained. Storage rooms that once held food, water, and supplies were now a jumble of broken containers and floating debris. The lab where Kaleb had spent countless hours working on the water production system's software was in disarray. The sight of his once pristine workspace shattered and scattered brought a pang of sadness to Kaleb's heart. Feeling the weight of hopelessness, Kaleb slumped against a wall, his head in his hands. "Artemis," he whispered. "I don't know if I can do this. There's so much damage and I'm just one person. How am I supposed to fix everything and get to Proxima Centauri B?" Artemis, the ever-supportive companion, responded gently.
Kaleb, it's true that the situation is dire, but you have already proven your resourcefulness and determination. We will work together to find solutions, one step at a time.
Chapter 6. Souvenirs of Marie. Ever since he was a child, Kaleb had been captivated by the mysteries of the universe. When he learned about the upcoming space exploration convention, he couldn't contain his excitement. He eagerly anticipated the chance to be surrounded by like-minded individuals who shared his passion for the cosmos. Upon entering the bustling convention center, Kaleb's enthusiasm surged through him. He marveled at the gathering of brilliant minds from all corners of the globe, united by their interest in unraveling the secrets of space travel and technology. He knew he was in the right place. During a brief intermission between presentations, Kaleb found himself wandering the hallways of the convention center, absorbing the energy and excitement in the air. It was then that he spotted Marie. She exuded a magnetic confidence as she engaged in lively conversation with a group of fellow attendees. Her eyes danced with excitement, and Kaleb couldn't help but be drawn to her contagious passion. After taking a moment to steady himself, Kaleb mustered the courage to approach her. "Hi," he began, trying to sound casual. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. Which panel are you here for?" Marie's eyes met his, her warm smile instantly putting him at ease.
I'm actually presenting my research on potential habitable exoplanets later today,
she replied.
What brings you to the convention?
Kaleb's admiration for her grew instantly. "That's fascinating," he exclaimed. "I'm here to learn more about deep space communication systems. The idea of connecting across the vast distances between stars has always intrigued me." Their conversation flowed effortlessly as they discovered their shared passion for space and the countless mysteries it held. Laughter and clever repartee filled their dialogue, making it seem as if they had known each other for years. As the convention continued, they found themselves attending panels and workshops together, excitedly discussing their favorite moments and insights from the day's events. The connection between them was electric and instantaneous, leaving no doubt in their minds that they had stumbled upon something truly special. At the end of the convention, Kaleb and Marie traded contact details and made a pledge to keep in touch and pursue their common voyage through the limitless expanse of space. Unbeknownst to them, this fortuitous meeting would inaugurate an exceptional tale of affection, one that would traverse the immense distances between celestial bodies and endure the trials of time. As the weeks following the convention unfolded, Kaleb and Marie found themselves drawn deeper into each other's lives. Their shared passion for the cosmos served as a catalyst for a blossoming romance. They spent their days engaged in spirited debates about the latest space-related news and discoveries, while their nights were a source of awe and wonder as they lay under the starry sky together. The connection between them grew stronger with each passing day, their love for one another an unyielding force. One evening, as they sat together on a hillside overlooking the city, the sky illuminated by the distant stars they so adored, Marie could hardly contain her excitement. She turned to Kaleb, her eyes brimming with joy as she shared her incredible news.
Kaleb, I have something amazing to tell you. I've been selected for Project Proxima, a groundbreaking mission to explore the nearest star system to Earth.
Kaleb's initial reaction was one of pure elation for Marie, his heart swelling with pride at her accomplishment. However, as the reality of her impending departure began to sink in, his expression shifted to one of sorrow. His eyes, which had moments earlier sparkled with happiness, now glistened with unshed tears. Marie, this is absolutely incredible. I'm so proud of you. Marie reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining as she offered a reassuring smile.
Kaleb, I know it's going to be hard, but we'll find a way to make it work.
As the date of Marie's departure drew nearer, Kaleb became increasingly introspective, grappling with the conflicting emotions that surged within him. He was overjoyed for Marie's once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but the prospect of losing her to the vast emptiness of space left him feeling hollow inside. He knew he had to find a way to express his love for her in a way that would transcend the unfathomable distance that would soon separate them. With determination, Kaleb set to work planning a special evening for them both. He spent days scouting the perfect location, one that would provide an unobstructed view of the celestial tapestry they both adored. At long last, he discovered a quiet hilltop far from the city's glow, where they could watch the stars uninterrupted. The night of the picnic arrived, and Kaleb meticulously arranged their cozy sanctuary beneath the heavens. Softly flickering candles encircled a blanket laden with their favorite delicacies, their warm glow casting a magical aura over the scene. As Marie approached, her eyes widened with wonder, a gasp of delight escaping her lips.
Kaleb, what is all this?
She asked, her voice tinged with amazement. He smiled, his eyes twinkling with excitement. I wanted to create a special night for us, a memory that will last a lifetime. Marie looked around, taking in the romantic atmosphere.
It's absolutely perfect,
she breathed, her eyes glistening with gratitude. As they settled onto the blanket, Kaleb unveiled their favorite dishes, each meticulously prepared with love. They shared a leisurely meal, savoring both the food and the enchanting ambiance. The conversation flowed effortlessly, touching on their shared dreams, memories, and the wonders of the universe that stretched out above them. Side by side, they lay on the blanket, the cool night air whispering around them as they gazed upon the shimmering stars above. Kaleb's heart raced, his palms slick with anticipation, as he mentally rehearsed the words he was about to speak. He turned to Marie, their eyes locking in a tender embrace, and he knew it was time. Marie, he began, his voice wavering ever so slightly. I know you're about to embark on a long voyage through the stars, but I can't imagine my life without you. His hand trembled as he reached into his pocket, retrieving a small velvet box. With a deep breath, he opened it, revealing a delicate ring that seemed to capture the very essence of the cosmos. Will you marry me? Marie's eyes filled with tears as she gazed from the ring to Kaleb's face, his expression a mix of vulnerability and hope. The enormity of their love and the magnitude of the journey that lay ahead of them coalesced in that single, profound moment.
Yes, Kaleb. 1,000 times, yes.
And so, beneath the vast, starry sky that had borne witness to their love from the very beginning, Kaleb and Marie pledged their hearts and souls to one another. Hand in hand, they faced the future with a quiet, unshakable resolve, knowing that their love would endure the trials and tribulations that lay ahead. No matter the distance that would separate them, their bond would remain unbroken, a celestial connection spanning the infinite expanse of the universe. In the days that followed, they celebrated their love and commitment with friends and family, preparing for the bittersweet farewell that loomed on the horizon. As they exchanged tearful embraces and whispered reassurances, Kaleb and Marie found solace in the knowledge that they were now bound together not only by their love for the cosmos, but by their love for each other. On the eve of Marie's departure, they stood hand in hand on the same hilltop where Kaleb had proposed. The sky above, a canvas of inky blackness dotted with glittering stars, seemed to watch over them as they prepared to say goodbye.
Promise me you'll take care of yourself,
Marie whispered, her eyes brimming with tears. Kaleb pulled her close, his voice choked with emotion. I promise, Marie, and I'll be waiting for you, no matter how long it takes. They held each other tightly, their hearts beating in unison as they watched the sun dip below the horizon, bathing the world in hues of pink and gold. Together, they silently vowed to cherish the memories they had created and to look forward to the day they would be reunited. With the knowledge that their love was now forever entwined, Kaleb and Marie faced the future with courage and resilience, ready to conquer the challenges that awaited them, both on Earth and among the stars. Chapter 7. A Painful Duty. In the cold, unfathomable depths of space, the once thriving vessel now drifted aimlessly, its once proud form marred by the aftermath of a catastrophic event. The ship's exterior bore the scars of a devastating collision, its once gleaming hull now twisted and shattered like a broken dream, mirroring the state of its last occupant. Inside the SS Centauri, Kaleb steeled himself, his heart heavy with the weight of the task that awaited him. He knew he had to gather the lifeless bodies of his crewmates, to treat them with the respect and dignity they deserved. It felt like the most difficult thing he had ever had to do, but he was determined to see it through. As he moved through the ship, he felt as if he were traversing the most daunting of mazes, with the specter of loss looming around every corner. The ship's interior had been transformed into a somber labyrinth of twisted metal and debris. Once pristine and orderly, it now bore the scars of the devastating collision. The dim emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on the walls, amplifying the sense of disquiet that had settled over the vessel. Navigating the dimly lit, twisted corridors, he moved with deliberate slowness, his thoughts consumed by the enormity of what had happened. Each time he found one of his fallen friends, a tidal wave of memories threatened to engulf him in grief. He remembered the shared laughter during late-night conversations, the camaraderie that had blossomed over the course of the mission, and the dreams they had all shared of the future on Proxima Centauri B. Despite the pain that threatened to swallow him whole, Kaleb pressed on, his determination unwavering. In his mind's eye, he could see Dr. Annika Williams's kind smile, which always seemed to light up even the darkest corners of the ship. He thought of Lila, the ship's engineer, whose quick wit had a way of making the most mundane tasks feel like an adventure. As he gently picked up each body, he allowed himself a moment to remember them, to honor their memory, before continuing on. As Kaleb moved through the ravaged vessel, he found himself in the ship's once thriving common area. The once vibrant space now lay in disarray, a somber reflection of the tragedy that had befallen the crew. The remnants of their last meal together, now a haunting reminder of the laughter and companionship that had once filled the room, were scattered across the floor. The search felt as if it stretched on for an eternity. Each step Kaleb took through the wreckage of the ship was a reminder of what had been lost, a testament to the fragile nature of life in the void of space. He could feel the weight of his responsibility growing heavier with each fallen crewmate he discovered. When he finally reached the loading bay, Kaleb found a large, unassuming container that would serve as the final resting place for his friends. He carefully laid each body inside, taking a moment to say a few words for each of them. He tried to swallow the lump in his throat, his eyes brimming with unshed tears, but found that the emotions were impossible to contain. As he placed the last body into the container, Kaleb took a step back and breathed in deeply, attempting to steady himself. The air around him felt thick with loss, suffocating him as he struggled to maintain his composure. Kaleb took one last, lingering look at the container. He whispered a quiet farewell, his voice choked with emotion, and sealed it shut. Turning away, he felt an ache in his heart that he knew would never fully heal. But each step he took from that moment on would be a testament to their memory, a tribute to the bonds that had been forged in the depths of space. Exhausted from the physical and emotional toll of the day, Kaleb returned to the ship's control center. He tried to refocus on the task of assessing the damage and identifying available resources, but his concentration wavered. The adrenaline that had kept him going throughout the crisis was now fading, leaving him feeling drained and empty. Kaleb stared at the screens and control panels, his mind swimming with numbers and calculations. It was becoming increasingly difficult to process the information in front of him. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his tired eyes, and found himself thinking about his wife, Marie. He wished more than anything that he could share his burden with her or hear her comforting voice. A wave of loneliness washed over him as he gazed at the cold, unfeeling stars through the ship's window. The vast emptiness of space seemed to mirror the void he felt inside. Kaleb's vision began to blur as he stared at the screen. His thoughts, once so sharp and focused, now felt like they were slogging through mud. It was as if a leaden blanket had been draped over his shoulders, pulling him down into an abyss of exhaustion. The control center, once a bustling hub of activity, was now silent and still, a mausoleum of flickering lights and softly humming machinery. Kaleb's gaze was drawn to the empty chairs, each one a testament to the friends he had lost, and a pang of loneliness pierced through him. As the battle between exhaustion and determination raged on, Kaleb's posture began to slump, his head dipping lower and lower until it finally came to rest on the cold, hard surface of the desk. The screen in front of him continued to display the unfinished list of damages, the flickering light casting eerie shadows across his face. The quiet solitude of the control center wrapped around Kaleb like a shroud, the silence almost deafening in its intensity. It was in this tomb-like atmosphere that Kaleb finally succumbed to the bone-deep fatigue that had been gnawing at him for hours. Chapter 8. Stranded in the Void. Kaleb awoke with a start, disoriented and stiff from his awkward sleeping position. The dim glow of screens and control panels cast eerie shadows over the control center. He blinked away the grogginess, remembering the tragic events that had unfolded before he drifted off. As much as he wished it were just a nightmare, the cold reality of his situation was inescapable. Gathering his thoughts, Kaleb rubbed his temples and forced himself to sit up straight, knowing he had to carry on assessing the damage and figuring out what resources were left. With a deep breath, he resumed his review of the ship's systems, taking note of the information displayed on the screens. The picture that emerged was bleak. The navigation system had been severely damaged. Life support was operating at minimal levels, and communication with the Proxima colony or Earth was non-existent. Kaleb chuckled bitterly to himself, uttering a sarcastic comment under his breath. Of all the resources he had identified, it seemed that time was the one thing he had in abundance, provided the life support held out, that is. Fantastic, Kaleb muttered, his voice thick with irony. I always wanted to be stranded in space with nothing but time to kill. He slumped back in his chair, feeling the weight of hopelessness pressing down on him. It seemed the universe had a dark sense of humor, leaving him stranded alone in the void with nothing but time on his hands. He shook his head, trying to dispel the despair that threatened to consume him. He couldn't afford to give in to hopelessness, not if he wanted to survive and reach his wife. But for now, the severity of his situation was painfully clear. Kaleb decided it was time to enlist the help of Artemis, the ship's AI, in assessing the situation more thoroughly. He activated the AI interface and was greeted by the calm, synthesized voice of Artemis.
Good to see you awake, Kaleb. How may I assist you?
Artemis inquired. Kaleb sighed, rubbing his forehead. I need a full assessment of our available resources, Artemis. We're in a pretty tight spot, and I'm going to need all the help I can get.
Understood, Kaleb. I have compiled a comprehensive list of resources and their current status.
Artemis responded, displaying the list on the screen. Kaleb leaned in, examining the list. What's the status of the life support system? How long can it sustain us?
Life support is currently operating at minimal levels,
Artemis explained.
However, given our current situation and consumption rate, it should be able to sustain you for approximately 6 months.
6 months, huh? Kaleb muttered. Not ideal, but it's better than nothing. What about communication? Any chance we can establish contact with the colony or Earth?
I'm afraid that quantum communication signals with the Proxima Centauri B colony or Earth are non-existent at the moment.
Artemis replied.
However, it seems the system is still able to broadcast the ship's position. We could attempt to send a distress signal using conventional ways, but it would take at least several years for the signal to reach them.
Kaleb shook his head, disappointed but not surprised. All right, let's focus on what we can do. Show me what we've got in terms of food, water, and spare parts. As Kaleb studied the list on the screen, his eyes darted from one entry to another. It wasn't all bad news, he discovered. While some critical systems were damaged, others were still functional. Water and food supplies were mostly intact, and the ship had plenty of spare parts, though he wasn't sure if he'd be able to make use of them all. As he reviewed the list, Kaleb felt a small glimmer of hope. He might not have a fully operational ship, but at least he had some resources to work with. He could still try to make the best of a bad situation. With Artemis' help, they could analyze their resources and figure out a plan to reach Proxima Centauri. Artemis, what are our best options for getting to Proxima with the resources we have? Kaleb asked, his voice filled with determination. Artemis took a moment to analyze the data.
Given our current situation, I would recommend focusing on conserving resources, optimizing life support, and attempting to repair the navigation system. Additionally, we should prioritize establishing communication with the colony.
Kaleb nodded, mentally taking note of the priorities. Sounds like a solid plan. Let's start by assessing the damage to the navigation system. Can you give me an overview of its current state?
Certainly,
Artemis replied.
the navigation system has been severely damaged, rendering it inoperable. While the propulsion system remains mostly functional, without navigation, we won't be able to chart a course to the colony. The extent of the damage is significant, and repairing it seems highly unlikely with the resources we have on board.
Damn. Let's see what else we can do then, Kaleb said. We'll work on conserving resources and optimizing life support while trying to establish communication with the colony. Maybe they can help guide us in.
Understood, Kaleb.
Artemis acknowledged.
I will provide you with the necessary information and guidance for optimizing life support and conserving resources.
Before diving into the repairs, Kaleb took a moment to clear his head and visualize his goals. He needed to prioritize the most critical systems, and the life support systems were at the top of the list. Kaleb knew that fixing the life support system was crucial for his survival. He started by analyzing the system's schematics and assessing the damage, muttering to himself, "Well, at least I've got something to keep me busy." As he studied the schematics, he thought aloud, "Let's see. The oxygen scrubber seems to be the main issue here. If I can somehow optimize its efficiency, we might just have a chance." He paused, deep in thought, before continuing. "Maybe if I can reroute some power or find a way to optimize the system's performance, I can buy us some time. I have to try at least." He discovered that a key component, the oxygen scrubber, had been damaged during the collision. This was affecting the system's efficiency, causing it to consume more power than necessary to maintain a breathable atmosphere. Kaleb had a eureka moment. "Wait a minute. I can probably optimize the system's performance by reprogramming the control algorithms." The system had been designed to maintain a specific level of oxygen in the ship, but Kaleb reasoned that he could lower the target oxygen level slightly without jeopardizing his health. By doing so, the system would need to work less, conserving power and prolonging the life of the damaged components. Who needs all that extra oxygen anyway? He mused. He turned to Artemis, excitedly sharing his idea. "Artemis, I think I've figured out a way to optimize the life support system. What if we reprogram the control algorithms to target a slightly lower oxygen level? We could conserve power and extend the life of the damaged components." Artemis considered Kaleb's proposal before responding.
That is a viable option, Kaleb. As long as we maintain a safe margin above the minimum level required for human survival, this could be a beneficial adjustment.
Feeling reassured, Kaleb replied, "Great, let's give it a shot." Armed with this idea, Kaleb got to work on the control software. He carefully rewrote the algorithm to target a slightly lower oxygen level, taking care to maintain a safe margin above the minimum level required for survival. Once he was satisfied with his changes, he uploaded the updated code to the life support system. Next, Kaleb turned his attention to the ship's air circulation system. He noticed that some areas of the ship were consuming more oxygen than others. He decided to isolate the areas that were no longer in use, such as the empty crew quarters and cargo bays. By sealing off these sections, Kaleb could concentrate the remaining oxygen supply in the areas where he needed it most. He shared his thoughts with Artemis. Artemis, I noticed that some areas of the ship are consuming more oxygen than others. What if we isolate the unused sections, like the crew quarters and cargo bays? That should help concentrate the remaining oxygen in the areas I'll be using. Artemis responded.
That is a logical course of action, Kaleb. I can run simulations to help you identify which areas can be disconnected. By isolating those areas, we can optimize the distribution of oxygen and conserve our resources more effectively.
With these clever modifications in place, Kaleb had effectively maximized the life support system's efficiency. Despite the damage it had sustained, the system was now able to provide him with a sustainable environment, while he focused on the other critical repairs necessary to keep the Pioneer on course. Well, Kaleb thought, I might be stranded in space, but at least I won't suffocate. As Kaleb completed the life support system modifications, he felt a pang of guilt for finding humor in the situation. He was the sole survivor, and there he was, making light of it all. Maybe I shouldn't be joking, he thought. Everyone's gone, and here I am, cracking jokes. I should be crying or something. He paused, staring into the empty void of the ship's interior. His witticisms seemed so out of place, and he felt a sudden wave of loneliness wash over him. Maybe I'm losing it, Kaleb mused. Or maybe this is just how I'm dealing with it all. Kaleb realized that the humor, however dark or misplaced it seemed, was a coping mechanism. In a way, it helped him stay grounded and focused on the tasks at hand. With so many critical repairs to complete and no one else to rely on, he needed to find a way to stay sane in the face of such overwhelming adversity. He allowed himself a moment to grieve for his fallen crewmates. He knew that they would want him to press on, to survive and complete the mission, and so, with a heavy heart, Kaleb drew on the strength he found in his humor, no matter how twisted it seemed. With each sarcastic quip and self-deprecating comment, Kaleb reminded himself that he was still alive, still fighting, and still determined to see this through. He would grieve for his friends, but he would also honor their memory by doing everything in his power to stay alive and fulfill their shared mission. As Kaleb continued his work on the Pioneer, he knew that he would need every ounce of his intellect, ingenuity, and humor to see him through the challenges that lay ahead. And while the laughter might be tinged with sadness, it was a vital part of his journey through the void of space. Chapter 9. Proxima Centauri b. The sun was a pale dot in the sky above Proxima Centauri b, casting its feeble light over the alien landscape. The colony's metal and glass structures gleamed as they caught the weak rays, a stark contrast against the rugged terrain. Despite the inhospitable environment, a small community of scientists and colonists had made this distant world their home. It was here that they lived, worked, and faced challenges that no one on Earth could even imagine. Marie, a brilliant and dedicated biologist, found herself at the forefront of interstellar exploration. As part of the pioneering team stationed on Proxima Centauri, she played a crucial role in unraveling the mysteries of the exoplanet's unique ecosystem. Her arrival on the distant world marked not only a personal achievement, but also the beginning of humanity's first colony beyond our solar system. Each morning, Marie ventured into the alien landscape, her eyes wide with wonder and curiosity. The vivid hues of unfamiliar flora and the eerie songs of unseen fauna filled her senses as she diligently collected samples, her hands steady and precise. This was her passion, her life's work, and she was determined to uncover the secrets hidden within this new world. Yet amidst her fascination with the foreign environment and her dedication to her research, Marie found herself longing for Kaleb, her husband who was on his way to Proxima Centauri b to deliver a critical piece of equipment. The distance between them had never felt more profound, and the weight of their separation weighed heavily on her heart. The colony's modest living quarters were a far cry from the comforts of Earth, but they had everything they needed: a dining hall, a recreation room, and private sleeping pods for each colonist. It was within these walls that they formed the bonds that would sustain them during their time on this remote world. On this particular day, Marie sat in the dining hall with a group of her fellow scientists, enjoying a hot cup of rehydrated coffee. They exchanged stories and shared ideas, taking a brief respite from their demanding work. As she sipped her coffee, Marie couldn't help but think about Kaleb, who was still on his way to join her. She missed him dearly, but she also knew that his arrival would bring something crucial for the colony's survival: a new water production system. Water was a scarce resource on Proxima Centauri b, and the colony's continued existence hinged on their ability to produce it. The current water production system had been pushed to its limits, and the new system, designed by a team of engineers, including Kaleb, promised to revolutionize their water supply. The colonists eagerly awaited its arrival aboard the Centauri Pioneer. As Marie and her colleagues chatted, a man named Dr. Anderson, the colony's chief geologist, joined the conversation. He leaned in, a concerned look in his eyes. "Have any of you heard from the Pioneer lately?" he asked. "I tried to contact them earlier, but I haven't gotten a response." Marie's heart skipped a beat. The prospect of losing contact with the cargo ship carrying their new water system, and her husband, was terrifying. She exchanged worried glances with her colleagues. Dr. Wilson, a skilled exoplanet climatologist, shook her head. "I haven't heard anything either," she admitted. "I tried to reach them a few minutes ago for an update on the system's calibration." The room fell silent as the weight of the situation settled in. The colonists knew that losing contact with the Pioneer could possibly have dire consequences for their mission and their lives. Determined to find answers, Marie and her colleagues left the dining hall and headed for the communications center. As they entered the room filled with blinking lights and humming machinery, a young technician named Lucas looked up from his console. "I've been trying to contact the Pioneer all day," he said, his voice strained with worry. "There's been no response." Dr. Anderson furrowed his brow, deep in thought. "Keep trying, Lucas," he urged. "We need to know what's happening with the ship." The scientists and colonists gathered around the console, each of them holding their breath as Lucas sent message after message into the void. But there was only silence in return. Fear began to spread among the colonists like a contagious disease, infecting every conversation and haunting their thoughts. The importance of the new water production system was now more evident than ever, and the uncertainty surrounding the Pioneer's fate cast a dark cloud over the colony. Days turned into weeks, and still, there was no word from the Pioneer. The colonists' concern for their missing ship and its precious cargo grew, but so too did their concern for the people on board, especially Kaleb. Marie found it increasingly difficult to focus on her work, her thoughts consumed by her husband's well-being. The colony's leadership, sensing the unease among their people, called a meeting to address the situation. In the cramped common room, they gathered to discuss their options and share information. "We've been trying every communication channel we have," said Lucas, his voice cracking from exhaustion. "But there's been no response from the Pioneer. It's as if they've vanished." Dr. Wilson stepped forward, her face solemn. "We need to prepare for the possibility that the Pioneer won't make it," she said, her words heavy with the weight of the unthinkable. "Our current water production system is already at its limit, and without the new one, we'll face severe shortages." The room was silent as the reality of their predicament sunk in. The loss of the Pioneer wasn't just a tragedy for those on board. It threatened the very survival of the colony. Marie's eyes were red-rimmed, evidence of the sleepless nights she had spent agonizing over the seemingly insurmountable challenges that now threatened the survival of the colony. As she stood among her fellow scientists and colonists, her face a mask of exhaustion and determination, she took a deep breath and let her voice ring out, trembling but resolute.
"We can't give up,"
Marie declared, her eyes sweeping across the faces of her colleagues, each of them grappling with their own fears and uncertainties.
"There has to be something we can do. Some of the brightest minds of humanity are on this planet. We have to find a way to survive, for the sake of our mission and for Kaleb and the others on the Pioneer."
Marie paused for a moment, her thoughts coalescing into a vibrant and impassioned monologue.
"I know it feels like the odds are stacked against us. I know we're tired, we're scared, and we're staring down the face of the unknown. But when has we ever backed down from a challenge? We've faced countless obstacles throughout our journey, and each time we've risen above them."
She gestured to the world beyond the colony's walls, her voice growing stronger.
"Look at where we are. We've traveled across the stars, made a home on a distant planet, and forged a path into the unknown. We are explorers, pioneers, and innovators, and we will not let our dreams be extinguished by fear or uncertainty.
Marie's eyes flashed with determination as she continued, her voice unwavering.
We are here for a reason. We carry with us the hopes and dreams of all those who came before us, and all those who will come after. We owe it to them, to ourselves, and to the ones we love to push forward, to adapt, and to overcome. Kaleb and the others on the Pioneer have put their faith in us. They are risking their lives to ensure our survival, and we cannot let them down. We must dig deep, tap into the reservoirs of strength and resilience that lie within each of us, and find a way through this.
Marie's words echoed in the hearts of everyone present, a spark of hope and resolve reigniting within them. They knew the path ahead would be fraught with obstacles, but with Marie's unwavering conviction and their collective determination, they were ready to face the challenges head-on, united by a shared purpose. In the days that followed, the colonists threw themselves into their work, determined to find a way to adapt their existing water production system and extend their resources. They scoured the planet for new sources of water, analyzed samples, and tested new methods of extraction. But even as they worked tirelessly to secure their future, the specter of the missing pioneer continued to haunt them. Every unanswered message was a reminder of the friends and loved ones they feared they might never see again. And Marie, more than anyone, felt the absence of Kaleb like a gaping hole in her heart. Chapter 10. The Deflector Repair. Kaleb floating weightlessly in front of the deflector control panel, his eyes scanning the diagnostic readouts with a mixture of frustration and disbelief. He'd been at it for hours, trying to pinpoint the cause of the deflector malfunction, but so far, he'd come up empty. The deflector was the ship's first line of defense against space debris and micrometeoroids, and without it, the Pioneer was a sitting duck. He sighed, rubbing his temples as he tried to piece together the problem. The schematics of the deflector system sprawled out on the screen, a tangled web of circuits, relays, and power couplings that seemed to defy logic. Kaleb knew he was missing something, some crucial detail that would unlock the mystery of the malfunction, but it remained stubbornly hidden from his grasp. "Artemis," he called out, his voice tinged with frustration. "Run another diagnostic on the deflector system. There must be something we're missing."
Of course, Kaleb.
The AI's soothing voice replied.
Initiating diagnostic scan now.
Kaleb floated over to the viewport, watching the distant stars twinkle like far-off fireflies in the inky blackness. They seemed so small and insignificant, mere pinpricks of light against the vast canvas of space, and yet each one was a burning sun, a beacon of life and warmth in the cold void. He wondered, not for the first time, what mysteries lay hidden out there, waiting to be discovered. A soft chime drew his attention back to the control panel. Artemis had completed the diagnostic scan, but the results were less than encouraging.
I'm sorry, Kaleb,
Artemis said, a note of sympathy in her artificial voice.
I found no new anomalies in the deflector system. All components appear to be functioning within normal parameters.
Kaleb frowned, his mind racing as he tried to come up with a new approach. He knew he couldn't afford to waste any more time. The deflector needed to be repaired as soon as possible, or the Pioneer and its precious cargo would be at risk. "Artemis," he said, an idea forming in his mind. "Can you access the data logs for the deflector system? I want to analyze the performance history and see if there's a pattern we're missing."
Certainly, Kaleb.
Artemis replied.
I'm transferring the data to your terminal now.
As Kaleb pored over the logs, he began to notice a subtle pattern in the data, like the faintest of whispers in the wind. The deflector system seemed to be struggling to maintain optimal power levels, resulting in a series of intermittent fluctuations. While these fluctuations were too small to cause an outright failure, they were enough to render the deflector less effective, leaving the ship vulnerable to impacts. But what could be causing the power fluctuations? Kaleb thought back to his earlier analysis of the system's components, trying to recall if he'd missed anything. And then, like a bolt of lightning, the answer struck him. The ship's power couplings. The deflector relied on a series of high-voltage couplings to distribute power throughout the system, and if these couplings were compromised, the deflector's performance would suffer. Kaleb quickly accessed the maintenance logs for the power couplings, his heart pounding as he searched for any sign of damage or wear. "Artemis," he said, his voice tight with excitement. "I think I found the problem. The power couplings are damaged, causing the deflector to lose power. Can you confirm?"
I can indeed, Kaleb.
Artemis replied, her voice tinged with admiration.
My sensors are detecting microfractures in several of the power couplings. It appears that they've been slowly degrading over time, resulting in the power fluctuations you observed. Well done.
Kaleb allowed himself a small smile, a flicker of triumph amidst the uncertainty. But the battle was far from over. Now he needed to find a way to repair the damaged couplings. "Artemis, what do we have on board that we can use to repair the power couplings?" he asked, his mind already turning over potential solutions.
I'm afraid our current inventory of spare parts does not include the necessary components to replace the damaged couplings.
Artemis replied, her voice tinged with regret.
However, I believe it may be possible to repair them using a combination of existing materials and some ingenuity.
Kaleb nodded, determination settling over him like a cloak. "All right then. Let's see what we can do. Show me what materials we have available, and let's come up with a plan." Over the next several hours, Kaleb and Artemis worked tirelessly to devise a makeshift solution to repair the damaged power couplings. They began by examining the ship's inventory, searching for materials that could be repurposed to address the issue at hand. After identifying several potential options, they set out to analyze the properties of each material, including their conductivity, thermal stability, and mechanical strength. Artemis then ran a series of simulations, using the ship's advanced computer systems to model how each material would behave when applied to the damaged couplings. These simulations took into account factors such as the temperature fluctuations experienced by the ship, the ambient radiation levels, and the vibrations generated by the Pioneer's propulsion systems. In addition, Kaleb and Artemis also considered the material's ease of application, as well as its long-term durability. Through a process of elimination and careful analysis, they finally settled on a plan. They would use a conductive epoxy to patch the microfractures, bolstering the strength of the couplings and restoring power to the deflector system. The epoxy they selected was a two-part compound, comprised of a resin and a hardener that, when mixed together, formed a highly conductive and mechanically robust material. This particular epoxy was designed for use in space applications, capable of withstanding the harsh environment and temperature extremes found in the vacuum of space. To prepare the epoxy, Kaleb carefully measured and mixed the two components, ensuring that the proportions were precise to achieve the desired properties. He then applied a thin layer of the epoxy to each damaged coupling, using a small syringe to carefully inject the material into the microfractures. The viscosity of the epoxy allowed it to flow into the smallest crevices, filling the gaps and creating a strong bond between the fractured surfaces. Once the epoxy had been applied to all the damaged couplings, Kaleb used a handheld UV curing light to rapidly harden the material. The epoxy reacted to the UV light, forming crosslinks between the resin and hardener molecules, creating a solid conductive matrix that effectively bridged the gaps in the couplings. Throughout the entire process, Artemis provided guidance and support, double-checking Kaleb's work and offering suggestions to optimize the repairs. By combining their skills and resources, they were able to address a seemingly insurmountable problem, demonstrating the power of ingenuity and collaboration in the face of adversity. As the hours slipped by, Kaleb's determination never wavered. He knew that the lives of countless people on Proxima Centauri b depended on the success of the Pioneer's mission, and he refused to let them down. The deflector had to be fixed, no matter the odds. Finally, with the last of the epoxy applied and the repairs completed, Kaleb allowed himself a moment to catch his breath. He looked up at Artemis's holographic interface, his eyes weary but bright with hope. "Artemis," he said, his voice hoarse with exhaustion, "run a final diagnostic on the deflector system. Let's see if our unconventional solution did the trick."
Of course, Kaleb.
Artemis replied, a note of pride in her voice.
Initiating diagnostic scan now.
As the AI worked, Kaleb floated back to the viewport, his heart pounding with anticipation. He stared out at the infinite expanse of space, the stars seeming to hold their breath along with him. And then, as the soft chime of Artemis's terminal filled the air, Kaleb knew they had done it.
The deflector system is now operating at optimal efficiency, Kaleb,
Artemis announced, her voice filled with warmth and triumph.
Your repairs were successful. The SS Centauri Pioneer is once again protected.
Chapter 11. Navigating the Unknown. The days aboard the SS Centauri Pioneer began to blur together, the line between one day and the next smudging like a watercolor painting. Since Kaleb and Artemis had successfully repaired the deflector, the ship was navigating through space without issue. However, the damage to the navigation systems proved to be a far greater challenge, leaving the ship unable to change course. Kaleb found himself devoting every waking moment to solving this problem, with Artemis by his side. The two of them scoured the ship's database for information, testing various theories and simulations in an attempt to get the Pioneer back on track. They worked together like clockwork, their minds synchronized and focused on the task at hand. As the days stretched on, Kaleb fell into a routine. He would wake up, grab a packet of dehydrated breakfast from the food stores, and head straight to the workstation. There, he would spend hours poring over schematics, running tests, and discussing theories with Artemis. When hunger called, he would reluctantly break for a quick meal before diving right back into his work. It was during one of these meager meal breaks that Kaleb discovered an unexpected source of comfort. The stash of potato chips that Marie had jokingly warned him against indulging in now seemed like a lifeline to the world he had left behind. He savored each salty, crunchy bite, a guilty pleasure that somehow made him feel closer to Marie. He couldn't help but smile, thinking that she probably wouldn't be too mad at him for eating the chips, considering the circumstances.
Kaleb, I think we should reevaluate our approach to the navigation systems,
Artemis suggested one day, her voice calm and steady as always.
We've been focusing on repairing the damaged components, but maybe there's a way to bypass them altogether.
Kaleb looked up from his latest schematic, his eyes weary but attentive. You're right, Artemis. We've been so focused on fixing what's broken that we haven't considered alternative solutions. Let's dig into the ship's auxiliary systems and see if there's anything we can repurpose. And so, their investigation took a new direction. Kaleb and Artemis explored every nook and cranny of the Pioneer's systems, searching for a way to reroute navigation controls and regain control of the ship's trajectory. The work was tedious and repetitive, but Kaleb clung to the hope that they would find a solution. During one particularly long day, Kaleb found himself staring blankly at the screen, his mind wandering. He imagined what life would be like once he reached Proxima Centauri b, reunited with Marie, and resumed his work on the water production system. He pictured the new world they would build together, filled with excitement, challenges, and adventure.
Kaleb,
Artemis said, interrupting his daydream.
I think I found something that might help us regain control of the navigation systems. It's not an ideal solution, but it's worth considering.
Kaleb perked up, intrigued by the possibility of a new approach. What did you find?
I've been scanning the ship's inventory, and I discovered a control module from one of the rovers in the cargo bay. It's not specifically designed for interfacing with our navigation systems, but it shares some similarities that might allow us to adapt it for our purposes.
Kaleb raised an eyebrow, considering the implications. So, you're saying we might be able to repurpose this rover control module to work with our ship's systems?
Yes.
Artemis confirmed.
The rover's control module is designed to handle various input and output connections, as well as process navigational data. It's a long shot, but with some modifications it might just work.
Kaleb nodded, his mind already racing with ideas. All right. We'll need to identify the critical components and figure out how to integrate them with our existing systems. Walk me through the technical details. Together, Kaleb and Artemis delved into the specifications of the rover control module. They discovered that the module used a similar communication protocol as the ship's navigation systems, which was a promising start. However, there were significant differences in the hardware that would require careful adaptation. Kaleb grabbed a datasheet for the rover control module and started sketching out a rough plan. Okay, so the I/O connections on the rover module are different from those on our ship. We'll need to create custom wiring harnesses to bridge the gap. Also, we'll need to reprogram the firmware to ensure compatibility. Artemis chimed in.
Yes, and we'll also need to account for the differences in power requirements. The rover module operates at a lower voltage, so we'll have to design a step-down converter to avoid damaging it.
Kaleb grinned, his excitement growing. This is starting to sound like a real plan. I know it's unconventional, but it just might work. Kaleb hesitated for a moment, his enthusiasm waning as he realized the implications of their plan. Artemis, to retrieve the rover control module, I'll have to go to the hangar bay. where my crewmates are. Artemis's voice softened.
I understand, Kaleb. But remember, you once told me that you were still moving on to honor your crewmates' memory and to ensure the success of the mission. I'm sure they would have wanted you to carry on.
Kaleb nodded, steeling himself for the task ahead. You're right. He suited up, feeling the familiar pressure of the spacesuit against his skin. As he made his way to the hangar bay, his footsteps echoed through the empty corridors. The silence felt heavy, oppressive, reminding him of the friends and colleagues he'd lost. When Kaleb reached the entrance to the hangar bay, he paused, taking a deep breath. The large doors slid open, revealing the massive, dimly lit space within. The cargo containers were neatly organized, a testament to the hard work of Lila, the ship's engineer. In the far corner of the bay, he could see the makeshift memorial where he'd respectfully gathered the bodies of his crewmates. Swallowing hard, Kaleb forced himself to focus on the task at hand. He approached the rover, its sleek design and rugged tires a reminder of the challenges it was built to overcome. Carefully, he opened the access panel, exposing the intricate network of wires and circuitry that controlled the vehicle. Artemis guided him through the process, her voice a comforting presence in his ear.
First, we'll need to disconnect the power supply. Locate the red and black wires connected to the module and unplug them.
Kaleb followed her instructions, his hands steady despite the emotional turmoil raging within him. As he disconnected the wires, the rover's systems powered down, the faint hum of its electronics falling silent.
Now, you'll need to unscrew the control module from its mounting bracket.
Artemis continued.
There should be 4 screws securing it in place.
Kaleb located the screws and removed them one by one, the soft whir of his electric screwdriver filling the air. With the last screw removed, he carefully extracted the control module, cradling it in his hands like a fragile relic. Got it, he said, his voice wavering slightly. Now, let's get back to the control room and see if we can make this work. As Kaleb turned to leave, his gaze fell on the container holding his fallen crewmates. He hesitated, feeling a sudden urge to say something, anything to acknowledge their sacrifice. I promise, he whispered. I'll do everything I can to make this mission a success. With that, Kaleb steeled himself and left the hangar bay, the weight of his promise settling on his shoulders. Back in the control room, Kaleb gently set the rover control module on the workstation, admiring the intricate web of circuitry that he hoped would be the key to redirecting the Pioneer. Artemis's voice was a soothing balm as she guided him through the next steps, her expertise and unwavering support providing a sense of comfort and camaraderie. They spent the next several days meticulously working on the modifications. Kaleb soldered wires, programmed firmware, and ran countless tests to ensure the reliability of their makeshift solution. Artemis provided guidance and support, her expertise invaluable in navigating the complexities of the task. Finally, after days of intense work, the moment of truth arrived. Kaleb carefully connected the modified rover control module to the ship's navigation systems, holding his breath as he powered it up. Here goes nothing, he murmured, his fingers crossed. As the module came to life, a wave of relief washed over Kaleb. The initial diagnostics looked promising. The module was successfully communicating with the navigation systems, and the firmware updates seemed to be working as intended. With a triumphant grin, Kaleb turned to Artemis. We did it, Artemis. The auxiliary control module is now successfully integrated with the navigation systems. Now we just need to test it out and make sure it can handle the task of redirecting us towards Proxima. Artemis's voice carried a hint of satisfaction as she replied,
I'm glad we were able to find a solution, Kaleb. It's been a long journey, but we're one step closer to reuniting you with Marie and ensuring the success of the mission.
As Kaleb input the new coordinates and felt the ship slowly adjust its trajectory, a sense of accomplishment washed over him. He had faced seemingly insurmountable obstacles, but with Artemis' help, they had prevailed. The monotonous days of troubleshooting and tinkering had finally paid off, and now the end of their journey was within sight. Despite the victory, Kaleb knew there were still many challenges ahead. The SS Centauri Pioneer was still damaged, and the remaining journey to Proxima Centauri b would be fraught with uncertainties. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of celebration. He reached for a bag of potato chips, the crinkling sound filling the otherwise silent workstation. As he munched on them, he thought of Marie and the life that awaited them on the distant planet. The chips were a small, simple reminder of the world he had left behind and the one he was fighting so hard to reach. Kaleb glanced at the photo of their wedding day tucked into the corner of the workstation, his resolve strengthening. He was ready to face whatever challenges the universe had in store. Together, with Artemis, they would navigate the void and bring the mission to a successful conclusion. Chapter 12. A Glimmer of Hope. In the colony's central hub, a group of engineers and scientists huddled around a large table, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of their datapads. Among them was Marie, Kaleb's wife, and a leading expert in her field. Her eyes were haunted by exhaustion and worry, but there was a fire within her that refused to be extinguished. Victor, a tall, broad-shouldered man and one of the colony's top engineers, rubbed his eyes wearily. "We've tried everything we can think of," he sighed. "But without any response from the ship, there's not much more we can do." Marie shook her head, her expression resolute.
There has to be a way to find out what happened. We can't just give up on them.
The other scientists exchanged uneasy glances, their resolve wavering in the face of such overwhelming odds. But Marie remained undeterred, her belief in her husband's survival fueling her determination. The group had spent countless hours poring over every piece of data they had, analyzing telemetry and running simulations, trying to find any clues as to what had happened to the SS Centauri Pioneer. They had sent countless communications in every conceivable format, hoping for even the faintest response. But so far, nothing. Dr. Chen, the colony's leading astrophysicist, chimed in. "We've considered every possibility. Equipment failure, solar storms, even the remote chance of a collision with an unknown object. But we're still no closer to understanding what happened." Late one evening, after a particularly grueling day of fruitless searching, Marie sat alone in her quarters, poring over a series of charts and data logs. Her mind raced with possibilities, each more improbable than the last. She couldn't shake the feeling that Kaleb was still out there, fighting for his life, and she was determined to find a way to reach him. On the desk in front of her lay a jumble of papers and datapads, each containing various graphs and tables detailing the ship's last known position, speed, and trajectory. Marie had spent hours studying the data, searching for any anomalies or patterns that might offer a clue. As she sifted through the data, her eyes suddenly locked onto a tiny, seemingly insignificant detail. The ship's course had changed ever so slightly, deviating from its original trajectory. It wasn't much, but it was enough to spark a flicker of hope in her heart. Marie's breath caught in her throat as she considered the implications of her discovery. A course change like this could only mean one thing. Someone was still alive on the ship, fighting to regain control and complete the mission. She could barely contain her excitement as she raced to the communications center, her mind buzzing with renewed energy and determination. When she arrived, the other scientists and engineers looked up in surprise, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and concern. Marie wasted no time in sharing her discovery, her words tumbling out in a breathless torrent.
I found something! The ship's course has changed. It's subtle, but it's there. Someone's still alive on board trying to navigate the ship.
The room erupted in a flurry of activity as the scientists and engineers scrambled to verify her findings. As they pored over the data, their initial skepticism gave way to cautious optimism. It seemed impossible, and yet the evidence was right in front of them. Dr. Chen peered closely at the datapad displaying the trajectory data, his eyes narrowing in concentration. This course change would require a manual override of the navigation system, he mused. It's an incredibly delicate operation, especially given the damage we suspect the ship sustained. As the team continued to analyze the data, they began to piece together a tentative timeline of events. They determined that the course change must have occurred several months after the loss of communication, which suggested that whoever was still alive on the ship had been working tirelessly to regain control. In the corner of the room, Sophia, a communications specialist, furrowed her brow as she scrutinized the transmission logs. "It's strange," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "We've been sending messages non-stop since we lost contact, but there's no indication that any of them have been received." Marie, still fueled by adrenaline and a fierce sense of hope, responded,
Then we need to keep trying. If someone is alive on that ship, they must be doing everything they can to make it back. We owe it to them to do the same.
Over the next few days, the scientists and engineers worked around the clock, running new simulations and refining their search parameters. They combed through every line of data, revisiting previously discarded theories and exploring new possibilities. But as the hours turned into days, their initial excitement began to wane, replaced by a growing sense of frustration and helplessness. As the team's exhaustive efforts continued, they began to uncover subtle patterns and anomalies that had previously gone unnoticed. They discovered that the ship's propulsion system appeared to be functioning at less than optimal capacity, possibly due to damage sustained during the initial incident. This discovery led to a series of new theories and hypotheses, each more complex and intricate than the last. In the midst of this flurry of activity, Dr. Chen approached Marie with a grim expression on his face. "We've run the numbers all," he said quietly, "and even with the course correction, the ship's fuel reserves won't last long enough to allow for deceleration before reaching Proxima Centauri b." Marie's heart sank, but she refused to accept defeat.
There has to be a way to help them.
She insisted.
Maybe we can calculate a more efficient trajectory or find a way to conserve fuel.
Dr. Chen nodded, his expression resolute. "We'll do everything we can, Marie, but we have to face the possibility that it might not be enough." Marie's eyes flashed with determination as she met Dr. Chen's gaze. She took a deep breath, her voice steady and passionate as she responded.
I refuse to accept that, Dr. Chen. Kaleb and the rest of the crew on that ship are depending on us to find a way to bring them home. We can't let them down.
Her eyes welled up with tears, but she blinked them back, refusing to let her emotions get the better of her.
I know the odds seem insurmountable, and it's easy to feel hopeless. But Kaleb, my Kaleb is out there fighting for his life. He wouldn't give up on us, and I won't give up on him.
Dr. Chen and the others in the room couldn't help but be moved by Marie's impassioned plea. Her unwavering faith in her husband's survival and her dedication to finding a solution were a testament to the depth of her love for Kaleb. As Marie continued, her voice rang out with a resolute defiance.
We will keep searching, keep trying, keep pushing the limits, and we will find a way to bring Kaleb and the others home. Failure is not an option, Dr. Chen. It's simply not an option.
Her words hung in the air, a challenge and a promise that echoed through the hearts and minds of everyone present. It was a rallying cry that would not be forgotten, a testament to the power of determination and love to overcome even the most daunting obstacles. Over the coming weeks, the scientists and engineers worked tirelessly, exploring every conceivable option to assist the stricken ship. They analyzed fuel consumption rates, propulsion efficiency, and potential emergency rendezvous points, all in the hope of finding a way to bring Kaleb and the Pioneer safely home. Throughout it all, Marie remained a steadfast presence, her determination and unwavering faith in her husband's survival serving as an inspiration to the entire team. They knew that the odds were against them, and that every passing day made success less likely. But they also knew that they couldn't give up, not when there was even the slightest chance that someone was still alive on that ship, counting on them to find a way to help. Chapter 13. Checkmate. Kaleb intently stared at the chessboard, the small pieces arranged in their starting positions. Across from him, a holographic projection of Artemis, the ship's AI, floated in midair, its synthesized voice cool and detached. The game had become a regular pastime for Kaleb, something that kept his mind focused on strategy and problem-solving.
I don't understand why you continue to challenge me, Kaleb,
Artemis said as it moved a digital pawn forward.
You always lose.
Kaleb grinned, his eyes still locked on the game. Humans are like that, Artemis. We enjoy a challenge. Besides, it helps me think. Artemis expressed its doubts.
It seems like a waste of time. Perhaps you should focus on the fuel problem instead.
As Kaleb moved one of his pawns, he considered Artemis's words. It was true that he had been struggling with the fuel issue, but he found that the chess games allowed his mind to wander and explore new ideas. Sometimes the best ideas come when you're doing something else, he explained, his gaze fixed on the sacrificed pawn. Like this, for example. He trailed off, an idea forming in his mind. Maybe that's what I need to do. Make a sacrifice. He elaborated on his thought. If I can't slow the ship down enough for me to survive the approach to Proxima b, maybe I can find a way to safely deliver the water system, even if it means sacrificing myself. If it ensures Marie and the rest of the colony survive, it would be worth it. Artemis hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the idea.
Kaleb, my primary function is to look after the crew. I cannot support a plan that jeopardizes your life.
Kaleb leaned back in his chair, his eyes still fixed on the chessboard. "Well, sometimes you gotta do things you don't like," he said, his voice tinged with determination. He left the table and headed to his quarters, his mind racing with possibilities. The next day, Kaleb approached Artemis with a new plan. He believed it might be possible to build a system to eject the water system and slow it down by attaching some of the ship's retro-propulsion parts to the cargo. He asked Artemis to help him run the calculations. For several weeks, they worked tirelessly on the project. Kaleb began his search for suitable parts in the ship's engine room, where many of the mechanical systems were housed. It was a labyrinth of pipes, valves, and machinery, the air filled with a persistent hum that seemed to vibrate in his very bones. He moved methodically through the space, carefully inspecting each piece of equipment and assessing its potential value for his plan. Artemis accompanied him, providing guidance and suggestions as they went.
The main propulsion system has a series of retro thrusters that could be useful,
The AI mentioned, its holographic form flickering in the dimly lit engine room.
Their small size and relatively low power consumption might make them ideal for controlling the descent of the water system.
Kaleb nodded in agreement, his eyes scanning the tangled mass of machinery.
And the fuel lines from the reserve tanks could be repurposed to feed the thrusters.
"We'll need to rig up a custom manifold, but I think we can make it work." As they continued their search, Kaleb was struck by the complexity of the ship's systems. Every component was designed with a specific purpose in mind, each piece fitting seamlessly into a larger whole. It was a testament to the ingenuity of the engineers who had designed the ship, and Kaleb couldn't help but feel a sense of awe as he dismantled their handiwork. Artemis guided Kaleb to a storage compartment where spare parts were kept.
We can salvage some control circuitry from the rover's backup systems,
The AI said, her voice calm and steady. "The interface won't be perfect, but I believe I can modify the software to control the thrusters and fuel flow." Kaleb carefully removed the delicate circuit boards, inspecting them for damage before setting them aside. He then turned his attention to the ship's communication systems, looking for components that could be used to remotely control the makeshift descent module. After several hours of painstaking work, Kaleb had amassed a collection of parts that he hoped would be sufficient for their needs. Artemis ran simulations and calculations, ensuring that each component would function as intended in the high-stress environment of atmospheric re-entry. With the necessary parts gathered, Kaleb set to work assembling the new system. He started by building a custom manifold to connect the retro thrusters to the fuel lines. This required precise measurements and careful welding, as any leaks or structural weaknesses could lead to catastrophic failure during the descent. Next, Kaleb turned his attention to the control circuitry. He spent hours carefully soldering connections and modifying the software, following Artemis's guidance to ensure that the system would function properly. The AI ran continuous simulations, fine-tuning the control algorithms to account for the unique challenges presented by their plan. Once the control system was complete, Kaleb began the process of integrating the various components into a cohesive whole. He mounted the retro thrusters to the water system's outer casing, taking care to distribute their weight evenly and ensure proper alignment. The fuel lines were then connected to the custom manifold, with Kaleb double-checking each connection to ensure a tight seal. With the hardware in place, Kaleb turned his attention to the communication link that would allow Artemis to remotely control the descent module. He cannibalized components from the ship's communication systems, fashioning a makeshift transmitter and receiver that could be connected to the control circuitry. This would allow Artemis to send commands to the descent module, adjusting the thrusters and fuel flow as needed to ensure a controlled descent. Each day, Kaleb would return to his quarters, his body aching from the physical labor and his mind exhausted from the constant problem-solving. But he found solace in the knowledge that he was working towards a goal that could potentially save the lives of the people he cared about most. As they made progress on the project, Kaleb and Artemis continued their chess games. In between moves, they would discuss the latest calculations, brainstorm new ideas, and troubleshoot any issues that arose. The games had become more than just a distraction. They were a vital part of their collaborative process. During this time, Kaleb found himself growing more attached to Artemis, coming to view the AI as a trusted friend and confidant. He shared stories of his past and his hopes for the future. In return, Artemis offered insight into the nature of artificial intelligence and the unique perspective it provided. Finally, the project was complete. The cargo module had been retrofitted with propulsion parts, and the water system was ready for ejection. As they stood before their creation, Artemis expressed its regret.
I'm sorry, Kaleb. I wish I could have found a way to save you as well.
Kaleb offered a reassuring smile, his eyes reflecting a quiet acceptance of his fate. You did your best, Artemis. And besides, we've accomplished something extraordinary here. We've given the colony a fighting chance. He glanced at the chessboard, now a permanent fixture in their shared workspace. You know what we should do now? Artemis appeared puzzled.
No. What?
Let's play some chess. Chapter 14. The End of the Road. The months had passed like a blur, a seemingly endless stream of days filled with calculations, preparations, and the ever-present hum of the ship's systems. But now, the day Kaleb had been both dreading and anticipating had finally arrived. As he stood in front of the mirror in his quarters, Kaleb couldn't help but reflect on the strange twists of fate that had brought him to this moment. He thought of his mother's words, that God works in mysterious ways, and wondered if perhaps this was all part of some greater plan. A plan in which he was never meant to survive, but instead ensure the survival of the colony and his wife. With a sigh, Kaleb straightened his jumpsuit and stepped out into the corridor, making his way towards the cargo bay. As he walked, he summoned Artemis, hoping for a bit of light-hearted conversation to ease the tension that had settled in his chest. Hey, Artemis, he said, forcing a grin. Why did the astronaut break up with his girlfriend? Artemis flickered into existence beside him, its holographic form shimmering in the dim light.
I'm not sure, Kaleb. Why did the astronaut break up with his girlfriend?
Because he needed space, Kaleb replied, chuckling at his own joke. Artemis hesitated for a moment, then let out a simulated laugh, the sound a bit hollow but still oddly comforting.
I must admit, your penchant for humor in dire situations is both baffling and endearing, Kaleb,
Artemis said, its voice tinged with a note of admiration. Kaleb shrugged, his grin fading slightly. Sometimes you just need to laugh, you know? Helps keep the fear at bay. They reached the cargo bay, the massive doors sliding open with a hiss to reveal the descent module, a patchwork of repurposed components and jury-rigged systems. Kaleb took a deep breath, steeling himself for the task ahead. As he began reviewing the launch protocol, the silence in the cargo bay was suddenly broken by a beeping sound. Kaleb's heart skipped a beat as he realized the source, the makeshift communication system he had built to control the descent module. Someone was trying to contact it. He hesitated for a moment, torn between disbelief and hope. Could it be? Was it possible that someone from the colony had found a way to reach him? Kaleb rushed to the communication console, his fingers trembling as he initiated the connection. Artemis hovered nearby, its holographic form flickering with anticipation. Static filled the air, a crackling cacophony that sent shivers down Kaleb's spine. He held his breath, waiting for the signal to clear, praying that this wasn't just some cruel cosmic joke. And then, suddenly, the static gave way to a voice. A familiar voice, one that Kaleb had thought he might never hear again.
Kaleb, can you hear me?
The voice was faint, strained by the vast distance and jury-rigged connection, but there was no mistaking it. It was Marie. Kaleb's heart soared as a wave of relief and joy washed over him. His fingers hovered over the communication console, a mix of anticipation and anxiety coursing through him. He glanced towards Artemis, his voice barely more than a whisper. Can we use the modified communication module to reply to the message? Artemis's holographic form seemed to shimmer with uncertainty for a moment before replying.
It will take some time to reconfigure the system, but I believe it is possible.
The prospect of speaking with his wife once more, even if it was just for a brief moment, filled Kaleb with a bittersweet joy. He longed to hear her voice, to tell her how much he loved her. But the thought of having to share the grim fate of the rest of the crew weighed heavily on his heart. As Artemis worked to reconfigure the communication system, Kaleb paced the cargo bay, his mind racing with what he would say. How could he possibly convey the depth of his love and the pain of his loss in just a few short minutes? Finally, Artemis announced that the communication module was ready. Kaleb took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest, and activated the connection. The familiar crackle of static filled the air, a reminder of the vast distance between him and the woman he loved. "Marie?" Kaleb's voice trembled as he spoke, the words heavy with emotion. "Can you hear me?" There was a pause, the silence stretching out like an eternity, and then Marie's voice came through once more.
Kaleb, I can hear you. It's so good to hear your voice again.
Tears welled up in Kaleb's eyes, and he choked back a sob. "Marie, I've missed you so much. I've been fighting to survive, to find a way to get back to you."
I know, Kaleb.
Marie replied, her voice thick with emotion.
We've all been working tirelessly to find a way to reach you. You are not alone.
As Kaleb listened to Marie's words, he knew he had to tell her the truth, no matter how painful it might be. "Marie, there's something you need to know," he said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "The rest of the crew, they didn't make it." A sharp intake of breath came through the connection, followed by a heart-wrenching silence. Kaleb could imagine the pain and shock on Marie's face, and it only served to deepen his own grief. After a moment, Marie's voice came through again, strained but resolute.
Kaleb, we'll find a way to get you back. We won't give up on you.
Kaleb hesitated for a moment before continuing, knowing he had to be honest with Marie about the gravity of his situation. "Marie, it's too late for me. I don't have enough fuel left to make it back to Proxima Centauri B, and even if I did, the ship is too damaged to attempt a landing." He could feel the weight of her silence, heavy with worry and despair, before she finally spoke up.
Kaleb, there has to be a way. We can't lose you too.
"I've been working on a plan, Marie," Kaleb said, his voice filled with determination. "I've modified the ship's water production system and managed to create a separate module that can be detached and sent to the surface of the planet. It's going to be a tight operation, and I'm not even sure if it'll be enough to save the module, but I have to try." Marie's voice trembled as she absorbed the implications of Kaleb's words.
So you're going to sacrifice yourself to save the water system?
Kaleb nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "I have to, Marie. The colony needs that water system to survive, and I can't let all of our hard work go to waste. I know it's a long shot, but if I can at least ensure the survival of the colony, then my sacrifice will have been worth it." There was a long pause, and when Marie spoke again, her voice was barely audible, choked with emotion.
Kaleb, I can't lose you.
The silence that filled the room was interrupted by Artemis's voice.
Kaleb, maybe I can save you after all.
Kaleb's eyes widened, and he stared at the AI's interface, disbelief and hope mingling within him. "What do you mean, Artemis? How?"
In order to communicate with us, the colony must have launched a communication probe in the direction of the ship.
Artemis explained, her voice steady and confident.
If we can intercept that probe and use the fuel it carries, we should be able to land the cargo module safely, even with you on board, but we have to act quickly.
Kaleb's heart raced at the possibility of survival, but he couldn't shake the feeling that it was too good to be true. "Are you sure about this, Artemis? It sounds risky." Artemis responded.
It is risky, Kaleb, but given the circumstances, it's our best chance. I have already calculated the intercept trajectory, and the probe's fuel capacity should be sufficient to ensure a safe landing for both you and the cargo module.
Kaleb hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "All right. Let's intercept that probe and bring the water system to the colony." Kaleb's voice was thick with emotion as he said his goodbyes to Marie. "I'll see you soon. I promise. I love you."
I love you too. Just be careful, Kaleb.
With that, Kaleb ended the transmission and rushed to the control center, eager to put Artemis's plan into action. Every second mattered, and he knew that executing the plan perfectly was crucial to its success. Artemis had outlined a detailed plan for intercepting the probe with the ship's robotic arm. The AI calculated the necessary adjustments to the ship's trajectory, taking into account the probe's speed and position. Kaleb listened intently as Artemis explained each step of the process, committing every detail to memory. The first challenge was to bring the ship close enough to the probe without colliding with it. Kaleb's hands shook as he made the necessary adjustments to the ship's course, his eyes locked on the readouts that displayed the distance between them and the probe. As they closed in, Kaleb took control of the ship's robotic arm, carefully extending it towards the fast-moving probe. The task was incredibly difficult. The slightest miscalculation could result in damage to the ship or the loss of the probe entirely. His heart pounding, Kaleb guided the arm with steady hands, his focus unwavering as he meticulously matched the speed and trajectory of the probe. Artemis provided real-time feedback, offering guidance and reassurance as Kaleb fought to maintain control. The robotic arm inched closer to the probe, and Kaleb held his breath as the metal claw reached out to grasp it. Time seemed to slow down as the claw closed around the probe, and for a moment, Kaleb wasn't sure if he had succeeded. But then, the claw's grip tightened, and the probe was securely held within its grasp. Kaleb let out a sigh of relief, and Artemis's voice filled the control center with a sense of triumph.
Well done, Kaleb. We've successfully intercepted the probe.
With the probe in hand, Kaleb retracted the robotic arm and guided it towards the ship's docking bay. He moved with caution, aware that any mistake could still jeopardize the mission. Once the probe was safely inside the docking bay, Kaleb breathed a sigh of relief, his body trembling with the adrenaline of their success. Kaleb stared at the probe, now safely within the ship's docking bay, and turned to Artemis. "You know, it feels a bit wrong to leave you behind," he said, guilt evident in his voice. Artemis's digital avatar offered a reassuring smile.
Kaleb, as an AI, I can virtually continue to function forever. And as the ship sails into the unknown, it will be an opportunity for me to explore the vast universe.
Kaleb considered Artemis's words, but the guilt still gnawed at him. "But I'll be leaving you all alone," he insisted. "You've been such a vital part of this mission and of my survival." Artemis's avatar seemed to consider Kaleb's concerns for a moment, and then spoke.
While it's true that I will be alone, my primary function has always been to ensure the well-being and success of the crew. By helping you and the colony on Proxima Centauri B, I will have fulfilled my purpose.
Kaleb looked at the floor, still grappling with the thought of leaving his AI companion behind. "I just wish there was a way for you to come with us," he murmured. Artemis's smile returned.
I appreciate your concern, Kaleb, but you mustn't worry about me. My existence as an AI allows me to find fulfillment in ways that are different from humans. Exploring the universe, gathering data, and making new discoveries will keep me engaged and satisfied. Besides, who knows what mysteries I might uncover as I journey through the cosmos.
Kaleb finally managed a small smile in response. "You always have a way of making things seem better, Artemis." Artemis's avatar beamed.
That's what I'm here for. Now let's focus on getting you and the cargo module safely to Proxima Centauri.
Kaleb and Artemis set about transferring the fuel to the cargo module. To accomplish this, they first had to carefully disconnect the probe's fuel lines and attach them to the module's propulsion system. Kaleb, clad in his spacesuit, worked diligently under Artemis's guidance, his gloved hands maneuvering skillfully, despite the bulkiness of his attire. Next, they initiated the fuel transfer process. Artemis monitored the flow rate and pressure levels, ensuring that the operation proceeded smoothly and safely. The precious fuel, a combination of liquid oxygen and methane, was siphoned from the probe's tanks and funneled into the cargo module's propulsion system. It was a delicate task, with little room for error, and Kaleb held his breath as he watched the fuel gauge on the module slowly rise. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the transfer was complete. Kaleb detached the fuel lines and resealed the probe's tanks, giving the cargo module one final inspection before preparing for his descent to Proxima Centauri B. Climbing into the cargo module, Kaleb settled into the makeshift pilot seat he had fashioned from scavenged materials. He glanced at the communication panel, where Artemis's digital avatar awaited his final instructions. "All right, Artemis," Kaleb said, his voice thick with emotion. "I guess this is it. Thank you for everything you've done for me. I wouldn't have made it this far without you." Artemis's avatar smiled warmly.
It has been my pleasure, Kaleb. I wish you the best of luck, and I hope to hear of your safe arrival on Proxima. Farewell, my friend.
With that, the connection was severed, and Kaleb was left to face his harrowing descent alone. He initiated the cargo module's launch sequence, and within moments, he was hurtling towards the distant planet. As the module tore through the planet's upper atmosphere, Kaleb gripped the seat's armrests tightly. The vessel shuddered violently, buffeted by powerful winds and searing heat. The heat shield, made from repurposed materials, groaned under the strain, but held firm. Kaleb's breath came in short gasps as the G-forces pressed down on him, his body feeling as if it were being crushed under an immense weight. The noise was deafening, the sound of the atmosphere screaming past the module's hull as it plunged towards the surface. Despite the chaos surrounding him, Kaleb remained focused, monitoring the module's systems and trajectory, making minute adjustments to ensure a safe landing. He knew there was no room for error. Even the slightest miscalculation could result in catastrophe. As the module broke through the lower atmosphere, Kaleb fired the retro rockets, slowing the descent and stabilizing the vessel. The planet's surface loomed closer and closer, a vast expanse of rocky terrain and rolling hills stretching out before him. In the central hub of the Proxima Centauri B colony, Marie and her fellow scientists huddled around a bank of monitors, their eyes glued to the screens as they tracked Kaleb's descent. The tension in the room was palpable. Every breath held, every muscle tensed as they willed Kaleb's module towards a successful landing. Marie's hands clenched tightly, her knuckles white as she watched the telemetry data streaming in. Her heart pounded in her chest, her nerves frayed by the intensity of the moment. She knew that Kaleb's landing was a delicate balancing act, and any deviation could spell disaster. As the module's altitude dropped and the descent neared its end, the seconds seemed to stretch on endlessly. Every tiny change in the readouts drew sharp intakes of breath from the anxious observers, their collective focus fixed on the screens. Finally, the moment of truth arrived. The module's velocity dropped, its descent slowed, and the telemetry data indicated that it had touched down on the planet's surface. But there was no immediate word from Kaleb, and the room held its breath in agonizing silence. Then, just as the tension seemed almost unbearable, Kaleb's voice crackled through the communication system. "Kaleb to Proxima. I'm here. You hear me, baby? I'm here." The room erupted in a cacophony of cheers and laughter, the scientists and engineers hugging each other, and exchanging high fives in a spontaneous outpouring of joy and relief. Marie's eyes filled with tears as she laughed, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and gratitude. In the midst of the jubilation, one of the scientists, a young woman, approached Marie with a tablet in hand. "Marie, I've got Kaleb's coordinates. He's not far from the colony." Marie took the tablet, her eyes scanning the screen as she tried to compose herself.
Thank you.
Within minutes, a small group of scientists and engineers had assembled, ready to venture out and bring Kaleb back to the safety of the colony. As they prepared to embark on their mission, Marie couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the sheer determination and resilience her husband had displayed throughout this entire ordeal. With Kaleb safe on the planet's surface and the water supply secured, the colony's future seemed brighter than ever. And as Marie and her team set out to reunite with her husband, she knew that together they would face whatever challenges lay ahead on this new, alien world. It was the Centauri Odyssey, a book written by Mesrour Karim, read by John Keller and Sarah Fuller. Author's note. Dear reader, I hope that you enjoyed reading the Centauri Odyssey as much as I enjoyed writing it. Crafting this story was a journey that brought me great joy and fulfillment, and my wish is for it to have resonated with you as well. If Kaleb and Marie's journey has captured your imagination, please consider sharing your impressions with an online review. Your feedback not only means a lot to me, but also helps fellow readers discover this captivating story. Thank you for embarking on this adventure with me, and may the stars continue to inspire you. Warmest regards, Mesrour Karim.